Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill him! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Okay, Alex. Do you go by Alex or Alexander?
Either one's fine. Alex is good.
Okay, cool, Alex. Why don't you introduce yourself, but give an intro, plug your services, any socials you want, and also just give a background if people aren't familiar with you, of what you're about and like what kinds of metaphysics you practice or are interested in.
All right, right on, man. So Alexander Moore, I'm the Hex Doctor on Instagram. I'm one half of practicaloccult.com. My business partner, Allison, makes the amulets and enchants them. I do the readings, spell work for hire, coaching, classes, pedagogy, etc. You'll find me also on the Instagram under the Hex Doctor. I warn you, though, Practical Occult is the clean version. The Hex Doctor is the unhinged and based version. So, you know, tread where you dare, I suppose. In terms of magic and whatnot, I grew up the child of two occultists. I've been doing this my whole life. This has been essentially the singular obsessive focus in my life, to the exclusion of what some might consider to be good life choices, and it ended up working out for me. My whole shtick is that magic works. It works better than people say it does. I crusade aggressively against people who doubt the efficacy of magic in terms of high-level miracle results. And I also make the claim, which specifically pisses off the Franz Bardon community, that this shit you can learn this a lot faster than you think if you just practice and practice correctly. We are operators of a skill set. This skill set, when applied and crucially trained every day in systematic order, can result in cities, extra human powers within as little as 6 months, as much as 2 years. If you consider, astral projection, psychic ability, healing at a distance, etc., cities, which of course you should. Well, let's see what else. I do Solomonic magic, traditional witchcraft, various streams of tantra. In my opinion, a Tatwashudi infused superior version of Franz Bardon's system, and I'm initiated into Trinidadian Obeah. And other than that, man, it's been several different kinds of folk magic, including North American conjure. So that's me. That's what I do, and that's why it bothers people.
Well, you came to the right show, Alex, because this is the show for based and unhinged, I guess. And also, this is the thing. I'm a tantric. I'm a Buddhist personally, but I'm ready to I'm willing and open to free range on many different kinds of magics, which I'm also very familiar with, and some that I'm not. And I always feel like there's a deeper metaphysics. I often use Kabbalah on my show, but that's not the only sort of we'll call it the common tongue between magicians to utilize to describe the sort of background metaphysics, but it is a good way. So, but I'm actually more comfortable and more familiar with using either the Mahavidyas or one of the more Vajrayana examples, like to describe the same kinds of things. But so I'm when you contacted me, I was very excited because I don't get to discuss Obeah or Kimboa very often. Like I did a little mini series with Nick on the Rejects, 3 parts on that, and then I've also done the show on reggae and Obeah a long time ago. But it's something that I am very familiar with. I grew up around, and it's a very interesting style of magic and a very interesting sort of cosmological system or framework that really pairs well with tantra, and there's many reasons for that. I'm sure we'll get into that maybe a little, but yeah, it's very familiar to me in many ways, I think. And I think it's not as dissimilar to other kinds of either folk systems or spiritualist systems than people realize. So
I can agree with you on that one. I mean, so the funny thing about me and Obeah is it's in terms of my chronology. Also, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. The only thing I haven't been able to magic out of my life yet is the common cold. But so, and also allergies. But so it's my most recent system, and it's funny because it's funny. I came to Obeah through what a lot of people consider the most, in air quotes, problematic method. I heard about it as a system of power, and like, I have no connection ethnically to Trinidad or Tobago. I don't really give a shit. I did magic to essentially find someone who would initiate me, which for the listeners out there, if you want to get into a system and you already have some magic, do a road opener to find your way more easily into that system. It's really, it's a good hack for life. But so the funny thing is, when you become interested in a system, it's really easy on the internet to go looking and doing some research and doing all kinds of, study into the thing, only to find out that everything you studied wasn't true. So like, I read Frisvold's book on Obeah, and my initiator, who's familiar with Frisvold, is like, yeah, no, nothing in that book is real compared to like, or in terms of like the system that you.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Alex. It was actually like something on my mind before we even started recording. I was like, maybe he's using like the Frisvold system. So I will just say, like, culturally, there is nothing. 0%. Pretty much. There's maybe like a few things, of course, relative truth. Most things are relative, and there are some things, but it's hidden within like layers upon layers of invented mythology.
Oh, sure. Well, the funny thing about Frisvold, though, because also you'll find about me that I'm not scared to put people on blast, because the fuck are they going to do to me? Most people's magic is weak anyway. So one of my Obeah initiates, Dr. Simone Kotva, a legend, who actually you should probably have on this show, because the woman is a PhD teaching in Sweden who like restores cultivation training from like medieval nuns. She's a treat. But anyway, so I initiated her, and she was like, I'm going to find Corellius himself, the person who initiated Frisvold, and I'm going to actually ask him about it. And then she fucking did. And found this whole thing where she's like, Corellius wasn't initiated by a person, he was initiated by spirits, which is a valid way of getting initiation. I've met people who have had that. They have the exact same training I do. They got it completely from spiritual sources, and specifically Tobago, because there are these like natural mystical shrines that are guarded by Obeah men there. And if you go there, you can get Obeah from the shrine, and then you'll dream the same cultivation practices that I was given, which is really cool and a really good point of context. But so Corellius just like basically says he wants Obeah real bad and does a bunch of sort of conjurations to Papa Bones in the form of Sasabosam, and he just gets it one day. And a lot of Obeah people that I've talked to don't really respect his magic particularly well. They're like, he has it, but he's not good at it, is the general take. But he wasn't shy about admitting that. So he initiates Frisvold, who traded him some Gnostic voodoo initiation thing. Because that's the thing about these kind of witch fire empowerments, which is what I was taught of as what it is there's a network of people who trade them. Like, let's say you have Obeah and you want to get Benedante from Lombard region of Italy, right? So you get in contact with some Italian witch, and you're like, hey, I want you to initiate me into this. And he's like, fuck you, no. You're like, all right, go hear me out. I got Obeah. He's like, oh, well, shit, now you got the Beah. Now, if you got the Beah, we can talk. So there's this sort of underground economy globally of like, I'll give you the juice if you give me the sauce, right? And so that was what it was. Now, of course, according to the lore, the thing that Frisvold gave Corellius was not very good, and the thing that Corellius gave Frisvold was the best thing he had ever had up until that point. But the thing is, Obeah, at least the lineage transmission that I possess, is outside of being extremely like bare bones training, which I love about it. Like it's very versatile, but it adapts to other things. Like there's a huge crossover between the 6th and 7th books of Moses system and Obeah. Now I learned the 6th and 7th books of Moses from a conjure man in the United States first. And the way I worked it then is a little bit different than now, because you add Obeah and the kind of pantheon of that to those amulets and the summoning of those spirits, and it creates a different thing. Sort of like how in Trinidad there are these like Goetia lodges where they have the whole ritual set up, but in the triangle they put a person in a chair, and that person trance possession incorporates the demon. And a lot of people use Obeah to facilitate that. Like if a person isn't a good medium, you can force them to be. Which, you know, is also kind of a spicy thing, because in the lineage that I have, there are several categories of spirits, like in most things. One category is called the messengers. They're these like mighty dead that serve Papa Bones, and you can put them in people, and you can do divination omens with them. And some people I know have been like, oh look, a homeless person, I'm gonna put a messenger in there and ask it a question because I just want to know like something. And if you're good at it, you'll get, you know, accurate answers that you can then verify later. It's a pretty aggressive form of forced divination, but it is a done thing. Anyway, the point is, you can incorporate a lot of stuff into Obeah if you have it. And because it's such a potent system and just raw power, it works. But that doesn't mean it's true. Does that make sense? Like just because you can force it to work doesn't mean it's like a universal part of the cosmology.
So I'm going to be honest with you, Alex, is that my experiences with Obeah in a more cultural context have nothing to do with it's not contextual to what you're describing. I'm not saying that what you're describing is wrong.
No, that's not what I'm.
The way that I understand it is slightly different, but I understand they call it science. So what you're talking about, where they use the 6th and 7th books, that to me is very familiar. They don't use it in the traditional context. Of course, they use the Dolorance books as well, which is like a compilation, right? And that's called a science book. So a scientist is not necessarily the same as an Obeah man, but there is similarity and there is overlap, but it depends. And it depends on the island too, because I've talked about this on the show, but my mom's French speaking, Francophone. So for me, I'm more familiar with Martinican Quimbois or like the style of Obeah from St. Lucia or places like that.
No, totally. And that's kind of the thing that I found interesting is when I was doing all the research before I got initiated, because I had heard of Obeah initially from the Frisvold source, and initially from someone who used to be a friend of mine who was connected to people that Frisvold had initiated. And she described it as very powerful, very potent magic. And because I'm a lifelong learner and magic nerd, I wanted more. But then I realized that so many different things were called Obeah, right? Like in the Bahamas, it's something different. In Jamaica, it's something different. Like especially with like Jamaica, as I understood it, it goes huge. Like I met this guy named Akiva who was a Kumina Obeah practitioner, and it was basically a necromancer, right? Like he had, you know, human skulls and he had spirit incorporation in them, and he had familiar spirits in the skulls. And for him, that was Obeah because it just meant magic. In the Trinidadian context, Trinidadian Tobagan context, it's more like the context of witchcraft in an old world sense, not in like an Anglophone, another way to describe folk magic sense, but in an old world sense, and a way to describe, if not outright malefic, then unnatural magic, right? So there's this book, it's called Witchcraft in Ghana, and I forget the author, some English guy, came out in the 50s. And the best thing about those anthropological survey sources from that era is they're usually written by crazy religious people who, at the very least, believed and understood what they were saying was true. And the way that this witchcraft was described is basically the Obeah system that I was given, right? It was very, it was more malefic actually than I expected. And it really is an empowerment. Like they describe it as a witch fire that is passed from one person to another, either directly or from a distance, you know, which is kind of funny. I mean, it's one of those things that you'd hear for example, if you study like lodge magic history, you'd hear like, oh, this Golden Dawn person initiated this other guy astrally. And you know, when I was growing up, I was like, well, it was a weird stopgap in belief for me, even though any tantric or internal power practitioner will tell you that distance and time are meaningless. You can affect things that you've never seen, you've never touched. And anyone who's ever worked someone through a picture can say the same thing. But for whatever reason, until I initiated someone in a distance and it worked the same way that I did someone in person, I had a hard time buying it, you know. But the point is, it's interesting to see how these things are so different. Because, for example, instead of science, it's referred to as Kabbalah, broadly speaking, in Trinidad, right? Like the books of Moses are Kabbalah, probably because they associate them with Judaism. But like sorcery writ large is sort of referred to by some people there as Kabbalah. And it's just, you know, an interesting linguistic kind of turn of phrase. But it's really interesting because my initiator told me
Did you get initiated in Trinidad or TT?
No. I was initiated where I live.
Okay. Did you go to TT and to visit?
No, I've not, but I've talked to people there. And the funny thing is, when I've talked to people there, there's like two broad speaking different kinds. There's like those who have an Indian background, and they're much more tantric about it. And there are those who have a more African background, and they're much more, for lack of a better word, shamanistic about it.
Well, they have the Shango Church is quite big, right? And TT. So there is an overlap between spiritualism with like the invocation of the 4 archangels at the 4 quadrants using Botanica candles.
Mm-hmm.
There's a similarity to like Miaoism in Jamaica, where they do more of a spiritualist mass, like a misa espiritual.
Okay.
But then they also invoke the 7. It's not the same as the like Cuban or Risha. It's not the same idea, but it is in a way. So I'm familiar with that. I'm also familiar with I'm very familiar with the more Indianized tantric overlay, but there's a lot of African or like mixed race Black people and Black people themselves from Trinidad who do incorporate like certain elements of Gujarati folk magic that have been brought over by the Indian diaspora, as well as more village tantra, like in the form of I'm forgetting his name, but there's a saint that they particularly like, but he's not an Orisha. He's actually Tamil Bhairava, one of the 72 Bhairavas. So they understand that. And there's also Our Lady of Saparia Shrine, which is a Black Madonna shrine, and you'll see Chinese Trinidadians will go worship there. They'll say she's Guan Yin.
Oh, okay.
And you know, like Black Trinidadians will go there and they'll say, oh, it's like the Black Madonna or it's Kali. And then you'll see Indians will definitely call her Kali, and yeah, etc. And Catholics will obviously go there and call her Mary. So it's a very syncretic place, the entire Caribbean, and especially TT, because you have 3 very distinct but also intermarried populations.
Oh no, dude, for sure. I mean, again, I haven't been there, but I've been told as much, and I've seen as much through the connections I've made, you know, remotely in the region. But it's just, I find it always fascinating because one of the reasons why I've been so hesitant up until now to talk about Obeah publicly, well, there's 2 reasons. One, I was fairly new at it for a little while, and I'm not gonna, you know, make the mistake of being like, oh, I do this thing, and it's been like 2 months, right? Like, you shouldn't do that. But also because there's like a degree. Not a degree. There's a population of Obeah practitioners who have never been to Trinidad and Tobago, don't intend to, got the initiation. Because there are populations in the United States, for example, of Trinidadian and Tobagan people. Like one is in Baltimore, Maryland. It's huge, where you can go and get Obeah. Like you got to ask around and find who the Obeah person is, but they'll give it to you, especially if it's the transmission that I got, because it's very no bells and whistles, no frills. The initiation is deceptively simple. And what's funny is when you do it, you hardly feel anything. Like you almost feel like you kind of were lied to in a way. And then 21 days after the initiation, it all hits. They refer to it as the drop. And everything hits and all these spirits show up and everything changes in your life. And it's really potent. But like I said, there's this population of people who use it only as a witchcraft empowerment, like only as a thing to make their magic stronger, which is why I sought it out. Like, hand to God, I have no shame in that. I just wanted more cool magic. And, I've never been hesitant to learn other people's magic because it was cool. Like, for example, I have a Vajrakilaya practice, I have a Curricula practice. I don't consider myself a Buddhist. I just know it works and I like it and it's cool. It's fun. Like that's the thing. I'm disappointing to a lot of more truly esoteric occultists because I'm like, oh, this like Black Sun Negredo experience that I had, it was amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I got laid with this shit. It was great. They're like, what the fuck, man? But truly, there are a lot of people who get it, who don't talk about it very much because they have no real connection to the culture. And whenever people like that, and I include myself in that, we hear about it, we're like, oh, that's fascinating, that's really cool. But is it the thing I got for the same reason? There's another reason why I think a lot of us who...
Can I ask, Alex, where you got the Vajrakilaya and the Curricula practice? Because those are actually considered to be restricted practices.
Okay, so interestingly enough, like a lot of people, I initially got them via Jason Miller. Like he put out a Perma course and I took it, and he put out a Curricula module and I took it. And then what I did was, because those practices worked pretty immediately for me. Like I was like, okay, cool, this works. Because the Vajrakilaya practice I associate with like an obliteration practice, like the blasting rod in true traditional witchcraft. Although it's deeper than that, I later learned. Because of course the mandala is a spiritual machine that you can maneuver and do things with. But then I was like, okay, cool, this is interesting. I want to learn more. And I encountered initially when I would try to talk to tantric practitioners, I was like, hey, I took this class, and and there's a pretty low opinion among a lot of tantric people about Jason Miller.
Yes, he's not a proper teacher. I'm not saying that about you, Alex, or about your empowerment. But I am a traditional like tantric. I'm just gonna say that right now, and I'm very infamously known on Twitter because I pull out my peg all the time.
Sure.
But the reality is like, yes, the ideas of their activities are simply conceptual. So like like the example you gave of calling something Kabbalah, well, there's a very interesting overlap with both of those deities, because Vajrakilaya is meant to clear skandhas, or as I sometimes call it, break klipas. Mm-hmm. There's a way of understanding Curricula as the Aisheth Zenunim, as the princess of breaking klipas. I've called her this many times on Spaces, on our group show, which is called the Grey Lodge, and on this show. And I have a whole 11 episodes dedicated to the Mahavidyas and comparing to Kabbalah. So for me, it's a very serious endeavor when you're talking about these things, because deities in Buddhism are actually post-conceptual. They are not husks, and we don't worship them. So I'm not saying this for you, Alex, but I'm just saying this for anyone listening. I want to put it in the context that they would normally hear me speak about it.
Oh, of course, man.
Of course, you're welcome to express it in any way you want.
No, absolutely, man. That's the thing. So I did find it to be a deeper thing. So as I said, when I approach a practice, I unapologetically approach it at first for what power can it give me in my life, and what cool abilities can it give me? Because the same reason why I'm a big Franz Bardon proponent, because it gives you all the nuts and bolts. I think his training is patched by other things. But so anyway, the story goes, I had that and I wanted more, and I couldn't find anyone willing to give me more because my motivations for it were not aligned with how they felt it should be, which is fine. And so I decided, okay, I want to do a different kind of tantra. So I moved to some North Indian tantra stuff for a bit, and I found a teacher of taught with Shuddhi. And that was a really potent experience, a really potent practice that I found actually helped me patch a lot of other things and make it not only more connected, but stronger. It's one of my core practices in terms of internal power cultivation. I found a Tuma practitioner that was quite good, and I learned that, and I added that in. A lot of these people, I don't think they want to be named, but one of them, he goes by Vijnananath. He's a great guy. He's also a physically local friend. He lives in the same city as me. And he taught me a bunch of really cool things and added a lot of cool practices in my life. And then I eventually ran across this Nepalese dude on various travels, and he spoke very good English, and he knew about curricula, and he showed me a bunch of things. He introduced me to a really close kind of ceremonial practice, taught me a different sort of sadhana to use than the one Jason teaches. Although, again, I guess, just for the sake of honesty, Jason's stuff never failed me. Now, whether that connects to the thing it's supposed to, or whether that connects.
Well, it depends. I don't know. Alex, is like the root of all sadhana is the mantra. So if he gives the proper mantra, yes, it can work for some people. Some people will be able to make it work.
No, sure. And that's it's interesting. That's the same thing I was told by this guy. So he gives me this stuff, and I go on my way. Because I've had the very good opportunity, the very good fortune to travel to a number of places, see a number of things, and train with a number of people. And I continue to do that, and I'm very blessed to be able to do it. Genuinely thankful each day. So then I go back to the United States, and I'm told about the Martin Board books, this like huge series of books on Purba practice, right? And so I buy them, and I start practicing them, and they work. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to add this to the Vajrakilaya practice that Jason gave, and it expands the practice quite a lot. And it's funny because the Martin Board books also give examples of like, if you need to fight another practitioner who's also using a Purba, this is how you can Purba better than them and things like that, which I always find very telling in any account of magic, if it's given like a contextual thing that isn't very common, right? Like, this is how you fight your own kind, which perhaps it's the conjure worker in me, but I think that that's a thing not often talked about, and a thing that honestly should be, because more people are doing more aggressive magic globally than they have in a long time. And there are plenty of good reasons for this. A thing I talk about on my social media quite a good deal. So I found my way around that, and then I had this friend, and he was like, hey, there's this Vajrakilaya empowerment happening like 2 hours south of you. You should just go. It's like a free thing, and I'm sure you've been to similar things. So I go.
It was free? Because
yeah,
just in traditional Vajrayana, Alex, is that we pay, and you have to be a member of the Sangha or have other empowerments to even receive a Vajrakilaya. So I didn't receive a Vajrakilaya until I'll use a magic number, say I was like 22.
Okay.
So, but I had been practicing Buddhism for many years before that. So I'm just saying that for us, like, this is probably perhaps why you come into conflict a little with more traditional practitioners. It's because Purba is not Purba itself, like just calling something a Purba and having one, that's sorcery. That's dagger sorcery. Doing Vajrakilaya is something else.
Well, so I'm actually about to. So you're right, and I'm about to get to that. So I go into this thing, and there's this lama, and again, I don't know. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not really into Tibetan Buddhism. I haven't researched it a great deal. So I go because I just I'll go to things. I'll see what I get. So I'm sitting there. He's saying all these things in Tibetan, and I'm feeling nothing. I'm having no psychic experience. And I will toot my own horn. I'm pretty good at receiving messages, seeing spirits, doing these things. I've had good training, right? And I train very hard, and I focus a lot on practical results. So I'm seeing nothing. I'm experiencing nothing, and I think, okay, well, this was kind of a bust, but whatever. It cost me literally nothing. And I go and I have this dream that night where there is this generic Tibetan-looking monk, and he says to me exactly what you just said. Like, what you're doing works, and it won't stop working. And for what his words were something to, again, I'm also not one of those people who's going to pretend like I have a perfect recollection of every dream or every spirit encounter or whatever. In my opinion, that's a sign of people like maybe they're making shit up. It's like, oh yes, the spirit said to me, and I quote, and they'll give you like 3 paragraphs, right? But he said something very similar to what you said. Like, what you're doing is not this thing. It is a sorcery, and it works. And you certainly won't be diminished in your practice of it. But you have to actually, what he said is you have to actually be a Buddhist to be able to do this, like the proper thing. So when I say that I have these practices, I do the practice. I don't really pretend like it's to the same degree as those who are religiously invested in that.
But Alex, is that it's not about you being a Buddhist. Buddhism is about the practice. So Buddhism is all about practice, especially Tantra, all Tantra. There's no Tantra that's not praxis. If you don't do Tantra, then you're not a Tantric. If you don't practice Buddhism, you're not a Buddhist. But when you engage in the practices, you should be clearing your own mind. That's what the Vajrakilaya, that's what is the difference between a Purba, doing Purba sorcery, and doing Vajrakilaya. Vajrakilaya is to clear the 5 skandhas, the 5 sense aggregates.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about having higher, if you want to call it higher Sephirotic experiences, or higher kinds of realizations, or even just to return to Rigpa, just to return to sort of pristine primordial consciousness, Diamond Thunder. That's what it's for. It's to clear conceptual obstacles in your practice. And yes, that may include people, but because you're raising yourself through bodhicitta, you're cultivating bodhicitta first. So that is what the principle of Buddhism is that you cultivate bodhicitta, and then you engage in the practices. And you're also engaging in refuge practices, meaning that you're taking refuge in the Guru Deva Dakini. And then you are also, in specific ways, generating the deity. But it already exists in a way.
So this makes a great deal of sense. And it's funny because, it's, how to put this? It's interesting to talk to someone who's farther down various paths than I'll probably ever go, right? Because again, I have had, specifically through Tawa Shuddhi, a practice I do co-sign on, I do put my name on. I do have that because there are, various arising as various deities, taking different forms, doing all this stuff in that as well. But there's a qualitative difference in that practice versus the things that we're talking about, at least for me, in terms of like how deep in it I am. Now, of course, I'm sure that there are different names for the things that I've learned that are the same as what you're describing, right? Every, Indian versus Tibetan, they're going to maybe call things different things.
I'm very familiar with Indian Tantra, Alex, so you feel free to use those terms. I took Sanskrit in university.
Cool. There you go. So
no
the thing about the whole Tawa Shuddhi thing, it's funny because there are experiences with that I've had that I imagine that a person like you truly has with, say, the Vajrakilaya thing, where, like, for example, one thing about the Tawa Shuddhi practice, like the base practice, is one of elemental equilibrium that then pushes you into what in a Western word would be called non-dual light. So it's primarily, much like in Franz Bardon's practice, where you learn how to work with the 4 elements and make them do things, and you learn how to master the elementals. And if you're not Bardon, you aren't an autistic moralist about it, and you actually do stuff with it. Whereas if you are Bardon, you are an autistic moralist about it and throw a tantrum if someone ever thinks about using magic for themselves. A thing I love Bardon and I hate him, right? Like it's a thing. But so you create these elements, you stack them in your subtle body to create a sort of equilibrium. Then that produces the Akashic void energy, which you then must learn how to use and enter and experience, because you need to project yourself into each of the tattvas and experience the realm within, and then be able to project it around you in a mandala, and then arise in the form of a protected spirit, distinct to each realm, right? And then you get to the Akasha, and you do the same thing, and then you project into this like white bliss state, non-dual light thing, where you experience yourself becoming perfected, and then you become nothing, and you become the light. And if you do it enough times, it actually works. Like you're not. But I'm sure
you're describing Zog.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, you're describing Dzogchen.
Yeah. You're not imagining it anymore. It just kind of goes. And then what you do is you picture a part of yourself or a part of your life that you don't like, or you want to change. This can be a habit or a blockage in your life, or a person you don't like, or a spirit that you need to destroy, or something. And then you use the elements to discreate it and remake it into something else, or discreate yourself and remake yourself. And then after that point, you summon Prana Shakti in this huge realm of crimson water and whatnot. And then you do a certain practice that I can't talk about with her in various ways. And that opens itself into a whole other series of practices that you expand upon and learn, right?
So sorry, Alex, do they consider this Tawa Shuddhi practice to be like Kali Kola or Sri Vidya or like Kubjika Tantra from Nepal? Like, is there like a specific sampradaya that it belongs to?
So that's weird, as I understand it. So again, it's funny. I learned it from someone, and having done research on it, there are so many different variations. Much like every system, village to village, you're going to see something a little different, right? And there are people who have different answers to that. I was taught it as a key to Raja Yoga. That was initially what I was taught it as. And the man who taught it to me said to me, like, I know what you want, but it will give you so much more, right? And again, because I don't speak Sanskrit, I don't do that. He Americanized a lot of things for me, and I'm very thankful for that. But a lot of it is, I guess, and again, I'm going to sound retarded to your listeners because I'm not as conversant in the lingo as you clearly are. And I'm thankful for the learning opportunity, truly. But
no problem. This is the thing, Alex, is like I have to be careful because I do get accused of being a sorcerer, which I also am, and I acknowledge that I am, but I'm also a Buddhist. So I have to be careful in my presentation of these subjects, especially because I do believe it implicates karma. I do believe it implicates my karma. So talking about like use the practices for yourself, I agree with that. But I also agree that there's a skillful way to do it. And I also believe that there's a skillful way to relate. I'm not saying that you're not skillful in doing it or that your teachers weren't skillful, but I tend to be very conscientious and cautious. So that's a little bit where my reticence comes from, a little bit. But I'm not upset about it or anything.
No, totally, man. No, I don't feel like you were upset at all. And even if you were, it wouldn't be the first person I pissed off. But truly, it's just interesting because it was described to me as the way he first put it was he said, it's an everything practice. And I said, what's that mean? And he goes, well, you'll see. I'm like, okay. And yeah, like I said, it patched a lot of what I think are some of the holes in Bardon, which I don't think were Bardon's fault, to be completely fair. But it expands the system and allows you to do not just all the basic, and I promise this waffle is going to answer, at least to the best of my ability, your question. So all the basic stuff, holding an image in your mind, all the internal power cultivation, all the working with different energies, all the use of stuff in your subtle bodies, it trains all that all the way up. And again, like the person I learned from, this is his only practice. Like this is all he does. And he gets like everything out of it. Like the man is by far a more powerful occultist than me, and he does like one thing. But this one thing, as I come to find, is so many things, right? So it's, I don't know what you would kind of call the kind of tantra that both purifies you, gives you extrasensory perceptions that you didn't have, even if you already had pretty good ones, enhances out-of-body projection, even if you're already good at it, amplifies everything you've got, and gives you access to all kinds of lokas and subtle realms of elementals and all sorts of amazing spirits. It's like a complete system. And it even has folk magic analogs where it's like, you draw the tatwa on like a doll or an effigy of someone or something, like, for example, to heal them. Let's say they have an imbalance and they're lacking fire, right? So you draw the fire tatwa and you do the mantra and you push the fire element into the meridians that the person's, wounded on, and you're supposed to be able to see that psychically, right? So it's sort of a universal practice. I don't know what you would call that in terms of what the official tantric word for that is, but it does everything.
So for me, this might surprise you, but I actually take a very anti-supernaturalist approach to magic and metaphysics in general, and somewhat of an anti-spiritualist approach as well. Not that I don't believe in the deities or don't believe in yakshas or yakshinis or dakinis. Of course, I believe in them. Many of those things are self-arising on the something that you were describing reminded me, or is actually probably the Mahasmashana. So the great carnal grounds of the world of ultimate reality, as we would call it.
Okay.
So we live on the Mahasmashana. There are 8 great carnal grounds, but there's also a center one. So when you're describing like the deities, the protectors, like, yes, I understand exactly what you're saying. You have to walk through different Mahasmashanas to gain different conceptual realizations, but then you also break the conceptual understandings because the reality is empty, not nothing, empty. And Indian Tantra tends to be a little more, it might call itself Advaita or be like non-dual in its presentation, but a Buddha's non-dualism is quite different. So for me, I like you were talking about lineage with Obeah. So for me, Tantra is purely a lineage practice. Tantra does not exist at yes, it might exist at the village level when you're reciting like Hanuman Chalisa and you use like the local dialect or whatever. But for me, there is no Tantra outside of the extant texts. So it has to draw from one of those texts to be Tantra, because that's what Tantra is. It's a rectification of the Sanskrit words. It's utilizing the funerary and carnal ground rituals to purify the Sanskrit from its corruption. So there is no distinguishment from the practice and from the text. And then what you're doing is you're engaging in wisdom science as you practice. So that's kind of the whole conception, especially at the more Buddhist and Srivijaya layer, is the word is fundamentally important. So we would consider like I'll just say for me, so what you're describing is like a system that seems derived from elements of Tantra and elements of also Hatha yoga. So Hatha yoga is not tantric, and there are different ways that we explain things that are tantric and not tantric. Like, I'll ask you a question. How many chakras do you believe that we have?
Well, there isn't
your
a
system.
Well, there isn't a set number. There are different systems. So they're constructs that you can put in yourself, as I have experienced it.
So in the Tattva Shuddhi system, how many chakra systems were you taught?
3 potential. There's one with three broad speaking regions. There's one with the 7 ones that everybody knows, and then there's one with an additional one to the to the above you and then below you. So 3, 7, and 9. But even then, those are, from what I've seen, and again from other systems of magic that I've studied as well, those are things you build. I don't personally believe that they are like set and extant in people. I think they're things you can.
I can agree with that,
because I believe
they're not set.
Yeah.
They're not.
Our etheric structures are mutable. They're protean, and we can build in them, much like you can build the muscles of your body through
build capacity, build prana. I totally build Shakti. Yes, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I mean the only physical text that teaches something similar to what I have was the Tattva Shuddhi book by Swami Satanya Saraswati, which is the one people can buy on Amazon. And the basic practice listed therein is 95% the same as the one I do. The one I do is just bigger and longer. But I mean, I guess it has a region. It's just interesting because, like, I suppose where you and I differ is I'm a very mythic literalist when it comes to sorcery of all kinds. When it comes to magic, I think that spirits are remarkably real.
I think they're real, but I also think that they're arising from your mind.
See,
I think there's a dialectical relationship, Alex, is that a tantric would understand that there's Sambodhya Gaya, Twilight language.
Sure.
So that there are 9 layers, especially in Indian Tantra, there are 7 to 9 layers of meaning within the realm of reality. But you can say the essential nature of reality, because I'm a Buddhist, is non-dual. So we would understand all phenomena as at least partly arising in appearance existence as part of your own consciousness. That doesn't mean they're not real. And I also believe in the Puranas, and I also believe in a lot of the tantric ideas and the tantric astrology. But I also know that it's partly my own perceptions, my own aggregations, and my own experiences.
See, I can agree with that to a point, right? Like, I believe that our perception shapes how we see these things. And I also believe, I know from lived experience that we can change them, bind them, and localize them, including other spirits, with various perceptive techniques. But I wonder how, a genuine question, how then would you describe the phenomenon of a spirit being stronger than a practitioner and it murders them? A thing that very clearly happens a lot.
I don't think it happens a lot. I think that those things are of people's own minds, and I think that they engage with it, and if they believe it's real, then it becomes real.
Well, then how do you explain poltergeist activity that injures people?
I think it's psionic phenomena, psychic phenomena. I think people also are vessels, conduits for these things to manifest, and that they manifest something externally of their own mind. This is a much more Buddhist way to think of it.
No, it certainly is. I don't agree, but it's interesting. I mean, so I believe that can be the explanation.
But okay, so give me an instance of a ghost murdering someone.
So let's put a ghost aside. Let's say a demon.
Well,
Right.
we don't, as you may know, Alex, we don't classify, we use the 8 great classifications of spirits. This is pan-tantric,
Sure,
both
sure.
Indian and Buddhist. So we
No,
have a
no, no,
different
I'm familiar.
ideas of the hierarchy of heaven or the hierarchy of the spiritual world. So we don't necessarily what a Western practitioner would understand as a demon is not inherently a demon to us, because we also have ferocious deities, right?
Oh,
Like
sure,
Kala
sure. No,
Bhairava or any
yeah.
of the or of the just a unenlightened Dakini on the carnal ground. That could be considered a demon, but maybe they through their self-arising nature, they become enlightened. So it's no
Okay.
longer a demon. So
So
there's a
then,
transmutational element to these things.
sure, sure. So to use that explanation then, because again, I'd say demon in a Western context, again, a Solomonic magician as well. But let's just use that. A hostile spirit of non-human origin. Again, presuming that it has a non-human origin, which I believe that many do. I believe that many are not of humans. They've never been people.
Sure. Yeah, that exists. We have Pisahachini, we have Yakshinis, of course. We have all those things.
But in my own life, and again, this is one of those things where it's like the stories we tell as occultists, right? And this is a thing that I find endlessly frustrating, because occultism, magic in general, is still a community of, I believe in your superpowers if you believe in mine, because so rarely can we prove this on a large scale. And unfortunately, I've not seen magic that works effectively, consistently on a large scale. Like your magic isn't stronger than a predator drone, for example. But like, I have seen hostile spirits hurt people that did not believe in magic, like that had no belief, were active, hard atheists, and were physically.
Well, atheism's its own problem.
I know.
Let's start right there. So the fact that someone is an atheist would open themselves to spiritual attack, whether from their own mind or whether externally.
Right. So what I'm getting at though is, I don't personally. I mean, my take is, I don't personally believe that in that case the external thing, whether it was observed by me doing it or not, had anything to do with that person's mind or another person's mind. It just was an aggressive creature like a tiger that decided to prey upon an individual person, and it succeeded in doing it. So how does, from, again, genuine curiosity, because I don't need to be told the thing I saw wasn't real, but how does that?
Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
I know, I'm not saying you are, but I was saying like whenever I ask these questions, I don't ask them from a point of antagonism.
No, it's not antagonistic. Yes, I'm challenging you a little bit, but definitely it's just a discursive kind of mode that we're going in.
It's actually refreshing, honestly. But truly, like, how is that explained from a Buddhist perspective, like a purely Buddhist perspective?
Well, I'm a tantric Buddhist, so I explain everything through that lens.
Sure. Well, then how is that explained through that lens?
There are things external to you that are real, but how do you interact with them? First of all, the primary thing. So this is what my contention with Vajrakilaya, and this is why I brought up the clearing of aggregates and skandhas. If you're engaged in Vajrakilaya practice properly, not Purba sorcery, very different. Vajrakilaya practice, deity practice with the Purba deity, both him and his consort. Okay, I'm not saying sex yoga or karma mudra or anything.
Sure.
I'm talking about generation stage, visualization, and mantra sadhana. Strictly. Okay,
well, that is what Jason teaches, though, to be fair.
As I said, Jason is full of shit, in my opinion, and I'm not the only one who thinks that.
No, I'm sure. I've heard that.
So I'm sure that he brings in some mythological elements, because there's many famous books about Kila practice, right? Like there's the Dark Red Amulet, which is a very famous book among magic practitioners, Western magic practitioners.
Yeah, sure.
Talking about the history of Vajrakilaya and who he is. And there are elements of his story which are actually also found in the Puranas. You might be fascinated or not to believe, if you're saying that you believe in the mythic layer. So he has a Puranic analog. He has Indian tantric analogs. So what does that mean if you don't have the context to put him in the cosmology? How could you possibly believe in him? How could you possibly understand who he is or how his function is? I'm not saying for you. I'm saying for. The honest
answer to the question is, I don't think you would. I think you could know a thing to be real and not understand it. Like, I know, for example.
This is the difference, Alex, is like, we believe most things are relatively true, and there's only one primordial truth.
Okay, no, that is indeed a very tantric Buddhist thing from the people I've talked to. It is an interesting thing, and especially when you straddle, in my case, a Western and Eastern series of practices, and you come from a Western culture, a Western cosmology, and you have adapted Eastern practices. You know, whether it's learning Tatwashuti, whether it's learning a few Leifa thunder rites here and there, whether it's, you know, taking a couple of bastardized tantric courses and using them in the magic works. It's interesting whenever you encounter like the proper cosmology of it, because
don't worry, a lot of Buddhist Twitter has me blocked.
Oh,
this is very I'm very infamous.
Well, it's the same reason when the Franz Bardon community fucking hates me, because one, I teach it better than he did. Two, I teach it for money, and that pisses them off. And three, I teach you how to use it in your life and be effective at it, and use it for you. So no, I mean, I understand pissing off purists, believe you me. Like,
but it's more, Alex, is most people don't even know. Like Jason Miller, I've spoken to him on emails. You know, it's like Gordon White. Okay, I interviewed Gordon White. He runs a Kimbanda, or him, Frisvold, Greg Carlwood, all those guys, they fund some kind of Kimbanda center in Uruguay. Okay?
Yeah, I heard about that.
They're all playing with different magics, but they're recognizing in it what I, as a tantric Buddhist, would just say are dakinis. So for me, Tantra is the primordial system. Tantra is the perennial system. I'm not a perennialist, I'm an axialist.
Mm-hmm.
But the Tantra is the underlying layer of the Puranas. Tantra is the underlying sort of like magical system of Central Asia, and it diffused outwards. And there's a relationship also it has with Kabbalah, very directly, one-to-one. So it has
well.
Pardon?
I said this I have heard as well from people who've studied.
Right, because it's very similar, and a lot of the early scholars of Tantric Buddhism were also Jewish. So it makes sense, like if they could recognize through higher Sephardic experiences, colors, elements, ideas, conceptual words, doesn't mean they'll understand all of it. It's like with your example of Nepal and your Nepali friend. I also went to Nepal and I saw the various Vajrayogini shrines. I saw the Chinnamastaka shrine. I saw the Varahis installed at the 4 pillars of the valley. I saw the old city Kathmandu. You were talking about mandalas. Old city Kathmandu is actually built as a mandala.
Right. This is true.
So there are various gates that you enter in, and you're going to, well, if you're really good in your mind, you will understand that you're walking through conceptual gates. That's the whole idea, right? Is like the construction of the mandala so people can physically experience it, and also inside their minds. So for me, when you're saying, oh, there's an external spirit, yes, I agree, there are external spirits. But if you tame your own mind first, you'll be a such more powerful practitioner.
Oh yeah, no, that's of course a given. I mean, any real system is going to have methods of doing that.
Alex, that's the primary idea of Tantra, is to fundamentally, especially Buddhist Tantra, but this is also true for Newari Tantra, is to have those, is to like be able to access that higher state, or maybe it's not higher, but you call it Rigpa.
Mm-hmm.
So through that non-dual thing, you are able to generate the deity and then deal with the ghost. That doesn't mean that it's not real, but you're disaggregating it. So maybe it's a thought form. Maybe it's a collection of that person's karma. Maybe it is a spirit that they pissed off. Maybe it's a spirit they pissed off in the past life. Maybe it's a spirit they pissed off in this life. It can be there's multivariant things. That's why I don't like to categorize the phenomenon simply as like just externality, as spirit, because part of that is also in your own mind. To what degree? Maybe we'll disagree on like the amount, but for sure, at least 50%, 60% is from your own mind. And how much it can affect you is also of your own mind. Because someone who has access to Rigpa or like knows practices, they're not going to be as affected. They won't need a magical practitioner.
So, man, I suppose I can agree to a degree. Again, you're right. We are going to disagree on the percentage, of course. And I do believe I misunderstood your original point. So thank you for clarifying. I gotta say that was my bad on that one. But yeah, no, I mean, I can see what you're saying. Again, I disagree with the percentages for sure. But I will say that if you are a skilled practitioner in any genuine system, that would be the key, then you'll be better protected. But I would argue that there are always, it's kind of like how there's always a practitioner who's better than you and they could hurt you. There's always a spirit that's more powerful than you and can cause you harm if you happen to come across it or cause it grief or try to bind it and you're not powerful enough, for example.
This would be the problem, is what you just said, is you're trying to bind a spirit. Why would you be trying to bind a spirit? Like, as a tantric, I can understand if you form a compact with some banana fairy in a tree in Thailand, like a Maynok or like a Yakshini of the tree, to get like win 4D is what they call the lottery in like Southeast Asia.
Sure.
I can understand doing that as like a low sorcery like thing, but spirit work is very dangerous, very dangerous. So like if you're antagonizing something that is inherently more powerful than you, spirits are more powerful. Spirits are more powerful than any practitioner. Not every spirit, but like the ones that can really give boons, they're much more powerful. They can
Most
really
of them, I would agree. But so, in answer to your question, so again, you got to remember both a Western and an Eastern practitioner here.
I will just say, Alex, that I did start off with Agrippa, was one of my first big magical books, and I've worked the greater and lesser keys to a high degree, both,
Okay,
and I've done episodes on them in the past.
In that case, you're probably going to understand it. I mean, so I did an interview and actually answered the very same question early on in my professional magic career, and someone said to me, it was on Goetia, and somebody said to me, like, well, why would you do this? And I'm like, well, okay, let's say your best friend has cancer, like pancreatic cancer, and no sorcery you are doing is working, right? Like, this person will die. This is when you resort to that. When you go, no, I refuse to accept this reality. I refuse to accept this a thing. This is the, in case of emergency, break glass sort of activity. That's why you have that. And frankly, I think that any practitioner who doesn't understand that has just never been back against the wall and willing to do something unhinged to get it done. Because if you can't do that on your own, for whatever your other practices are, this could be that you're just not good enough yet and bad things happened to you. This could be you thought you were better than you were, and we've all been there. I think anybody who says that they've always had a perfect understanding of their own ability is lying. Or, you know, life just throws a curveball at you, and for whatever reason, you are incapable of fixing it without doing something transgressive.
Okay, well, so I disagree with you on both points, because Goetia to me is a non-dual practice that should also, the greater keys should be worked with the lesser keys. It's very clear in Agrippa, if you read it with a non-dual approach, that the Goetic spirits are really shadows, and just like the angels are the effulgent light. So in a Buddhist way, we would say neither nor. It's never either or, it's always neither nor. So I would say both are bullshit in a way. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying you can't make manifest spirits. I've done it. I'm saying that I don't agree with that anymore. My framework has totally changed. So well, for me, that is probably number one. Secondly, about transgression, I don't think you need transgression to move things in reality, because I know for a fact you don't. You know, I know that there are interesting conceptual ideas, and there are ways to move the mandala leftward or rightward, depending on what deity you're visualizing or what sadhana you're doing, and which ways to rotate the mandala in your mind, and which ways to rotate the mantra in your mind, and which hand to use when you're doing puja. But for me, it's not transgressive because it's non-dual, and I'm not actually doing anything to particularly, I'm not doing it in an anti-cosmic way. I'm doing it is more, I'll use a Kabbalistic way, tohu and tikkun. I'm expanding and contracting. I'm breaking the klipa, and then I'm putting it back together, rectifying it. So that's really the purpose of tantra. So I'm just going to speak from a tantric perspective. But
of course,
for me, there is no, like, transgression is where you break vows, where you talk about things you're not supposed to talk about, where you teach people practices you're not supposed to teach them, and you introduce them to a specific tantric things that they could utilize for low sorcery. So for me, I'm very anti-low sorcery, because I see that there's a way to achieve those things, if you want to call them worldly boons. So we would call a lot of what you described at the very beginning, they come from the list of 13, but sometimes it's reduced down to 8. They're called the 8 major cities, the Mahasiddhis. But we have different lists in Tantra. So those ones are actually worldly boons, is how we would describe it. And the cities are actually different things altogether. So if I want to do worldly things, yes, I might do worldly sorcery to get there, but I'm not going to be like, this isn't going to be my primary method, my primary vehicle of getting there. I'm going to actually use higher tantric practices. But my mindset is going to be different because, again, taking refuge, bodhicitta, non-dual, approaching things in a more, approaching things more as consciousness rather than as quote unquote spiritual.
Sure, I mean, I see what you're saying. Again, I mean, we have a different worldview of that. So a bit of a backpedal on transgression, keeping in mind when you're talking about that from a Western context, especially a modern Western context, a lot of people in the Western world would look at, especially historically, I'd say probably almost certainly did look at Goetia as a transgressive practice, because even though you're using biblical god names and whatnot, you're still summoning demons. Now, I am of the opinion that they are very real creatures, and I'm not saying you're not of that opinion, but I believe I have had the experience of them being extant, separate from me. And again, the binding of spirits, one, that is how the method works. Now, I will say, I'm glad that you mentioned the whole combining the greater and lesser key thing. So I guess for context, I learned Solomonic magic from my father. We come from a family tradition, so it wasn't like I learned it from the DeLawrence books or the Mathers translation or whatever. So I was just taught both, right? That was just, it was magic, right? That was what it was. But again, I mean, the whole binding of demons thing, it's part and parcel with that system. But my point in general is sometimes you need to do something dangerous to get a huge result if you need to.
Oh, I agree with that.
And
I agree.
So
Tantra is very dangerous. I totally agree. I think people should not play with it until they're ready.
Yeah, but just in order to answer your question, like, why would you do a dangerous binding of a spirit? Is if I am unable, with everything else I know, which at this point is significant, to solve a problem, and I need it to be solved. Again, the whole friend with pancreatic cancer, like, that isn't the hypothetical. That's the thing I did. You don't get better from pancreatic cancer. You know what I mean? That kills you. And if it's like, well, I refuse to let this happen, then sometimes you need to refuse to let it happen. And I will admit that maybe a more Western, my will be done sort of thing. But, separating oneself from a context that's close to one's heart, because I will say, having talked to true tantric practitioners, people who, like yourself, it really goes to show just how not of that mindset that I am, despite having a great love of internal power cultivation, doing hours of it a day, training this stuff. It's one of the reasons I think why I defaulted so much to Bardon stuff after taught with Shuddhi, because it kind of just fits my brain better, if that makes sense.
Bardon's really great. We read Bardon for the Grey Lodge, like, as a part of our book club. And we did it like public, like 3-hour kind of like group lectures, you could call it. So we read like one of the first Bardon books. I can't even remember which one.
Initiation to Hermetics is the first one.
I don't even think it was that one, but we read one Bardon book. It was like a year ago, so I apologize. But
no worries, man, no worries.
It made a lot of sense to me in terms of like comparing it to like Dzogchen practices, like using your dorji and your the bell to sort of like rearrange, like readjust the elemental proportions in your body, very much like how you were discussing.
Like I said,
this makes a lot. It all makes sense. It's very like, it's very internal. Like I don't do Dzogchen personally. I'm more of a Mahayoga person. I like deity practice the best. But I've also been doing it forever. I've been doing it since I was like earlier than 13, but that's pretty much when I first started really being more of a, I guess, more serious practitioner of Buddhism. But I still didn't know what I was doing until I was like in my late 20s. So it wasn't like I had instant access to knowledge or anything.
Some of these things take time for sure. But my point in general, which I find just an interesting thing to opine on, and this conversation has been a really cool proof of concept for me about that. Again, thank you very much for having me on here, man. This has been really enlightening in a number of ways, just for personal.
No, I think it's great. I think a lot of people that listen, like people who listen, like people that I know listen to the show, I think they'll actually really enjoy this, because this is the side of Jin that they see more on Twitter, and they never get to hear it on the show because I actually am so much more mild.
No, man, I definitely.
No, I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you.
It's interesting because it's very rare. I'll just say this: it's very rare and I'm going to use air quotes because I hate the occult community. It's very rare to find people of passion, right? And that's a thing that I have an issue with, because I'm passionate about sorcery, about magic, about psychic powers, about the nuts and bolts, the operator cool shit. That's always been a deep yearning passion of mine. When I was shown that magic was real by my father, I knew exactly what I cared about in life. I had no doubt I've never not been that thing. You know what I mean? But when you talk to a lot of other occultists, especially in the podcast space where everyone's so careful about stepping on anyone's toes or saying anything problematic or saying anything to offend anybody or having any kind of strong opinion, you know, people who they're so afraid to cast a shadow they won't stand up. You know what I'm saying?
Alex, I think I have the best esoteric podcast of all of them, hands down. I've said it publicly. I've feuded with all of them, and I've never feuded with Gordon White. I'll just say that, but I do like my show better than Rinsu. Sorry, and basically, I've had my battles. I just don't fight them anymore. That's pretty much where I'm at. Like I'm a sorcerer. They can either, a lot of them have come into my DMs and been like, "Come on my show. Why don't, or can I come on your show?" So I'm sort of getting like this thing where I have like people know who I am. It's like I've had Greg Kaminsky on, OG from Occult Personality. You know, we had a serious discussion on Tantric Buddhism. And I was like a green podcaster, didn't really know what I was doing. But he, thought I was like smart enough and like capable enough to like have a 2-hour discussion. So
you're clearly very knowledgeable about your shit, man. It's deeply. But like I said, my appreciation for passion here is something that actually I really wish, because that's the thing, on my own social media, I'm extremely direct. I'm extremely willing to say things that I feel are true, regardless of if they upset people. And a big focus of mine is ability, proof of concept, right? Like, you got to do this stuff, and it's the thing I'm passionate about. But whenever I talk to people, usually I don't get any pushback of any kind, especially if you're like on someone like, "Oh, it's really interesting. Actually, I really like that." I'm like, "Do you?" Because you don't need to, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. My life is wonderful because I enchanted for it. Like, I stand in the proof of what I do. But I appreciate not just the opportunity to be educated by people, because as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of people don't know nearly as much as they purport to about any individual system. But also the just like the auric field feeling of someone who's like, "I love this shit." You know what I mean?
I love magic. I fully love magic. I love sorcery. I love these kinds of discussions, even when they're I think that there's strength in tension. This is something one of my co-hosts taught me when we spoke to Toby Chappell and Stephen Flowers. So basically, like, I understand that there's a stability also in tension. So I agree with you that this is like what I want to talk about. This is what I want to be, on record discussing is magic for the new Aeon. I'm not a Telemite, but I do like that framework.
Sure. And I think that's useful. I mean, a big thing I talk about too that has also gotten me in some hot water with people is not just magic for 2025 into 2026, right? Like, I'm one of the few people in the game that I can point to who will directly address even people's individual questions, because, like, perfect example, you go to someone, a talking head, an established person that you call community for whatever that means, and I've seen this, right? Like, I've seen this anecdote isn't like a hypothetical. I've seen it. Guy goes to, say, Jason Miller, says, "Hey, I'm lonely as fuck, and I'm sad, and I want to get laid, and I want a girlfriend. What do I do?" Jason goes, well, that's, you shouldn't think like that. That's gross. That's misogynistic. That's awful. They go to me and I'm like, all right, look, you know what I mean? Like, get laid, get paid, get even. You got to start somewhere. I'll give you what works. Now, I have my opinions on which spiritual technology is most useful in terms of an extrapolated future. Like, for example, you can hag ride somebody with relative ease if you just practice astral projection, then go beat somebody up. But is there really that much use for that practice in the world today? Are you really going to be stealing the energetic prosperity, the vital energy of Farmer Brown's cow, and then feeding it into your familiar spirit necessarily? I mean, like, I don't know, maybe you will. There are people in the world who do. I actually do know. I'm on a first name basis with a couple of people who do, to be fair. But yeah, you live in the United States, perhaps that's not your move. Just like compulsory love spells, very possible, but it's much easier to like summon someone new into your life, especially when you have the internet.
Yes, I agree with you, Alex. I think it's so much easier when I used to practice more of like, we'll call it like folk Solomonic magic, because I would combine very much like you do. Like I would combine different technologies. That's a perfect way of frameworks, different ways to do it, right? That's very American, very like modern magic 2025.
Like hypothetically, let's say it's 1985. And the thing that's interesting about having a family that practices magic is I have access to journals from, decades ago, generations ago, seeing how people practiced the magic that I learned growing up and in the world that they, and that's fascinating, right? When you see the people's mindsets and everything. But like, you're no longer bound to your hometown where there's like 4 appealing people and you're like, I must have one of you. You have the whole world. But it's also a question of like, how long do you want this to last? Do you want this to work? Do you want to win? And because I do frame things, especially in the game of life, as did you win or did you lose? And that's by your own metric, but you have one if you think hard enough, and you shouldn't have to think that hard. And again, I think my business partner Allison said something to me really interesting lately, and she's like, especially in magic, the age of the quote influencer is over and the age of the expert is dawning, because no one has time, money, or patience any longer for one cool manifestation hack that gets you what you need, or another class on bioregional white guilt sorcery, right? Like, they don't need that. They need shit that works. They're lonely, they're sad, they're poor, they're not doing well.
Yeah, pragmatic magic.
They need magic that fixes these problems. And the thing is, when you practice various systems, at least I can speak for myself, you will have visionary experiences, you will learn interesting secrets, you will see things that only make sense to you years later. You'll have these realizations, but those things are worth fuck all if you can't pay your rent, right? They're worth nothing if you are not doing well, which is one of the reasons why, even in my debate, because I've had some arguments with more, let's call it, anti-worldly sorcery types who are like, no, it's all about the mysticism, it's all about the great work, in air quotes, it's all about this. And I'm like, well, if you're an alchemist and you can't do alchemy to, for example, cure baldness, you suck at alchemy. If you can't do the medical alchemy that fixes things, if you're only concerned about that, that's a problem. If you're only going to meditate to reach this sort of non-dual experience, and again, I've done it, it didn't make me any less beholden to my fucking electric bill. You know what I mean? Like, that is a cruel God and it rules us all. But
let me just say in response to that, Alex, is that I think that those, we'll call it Dathic experiences of higher knowledge, it's not meant for sorcery. It's meant to take that back to Malkuth, if you want to call it that, and then do something with it there. So very much what you're saying, like a pragmatic magic, but it's not in and of itself to solve, like, that's not what Dath is, right?
And yeah,
it's a hidden Sephira. It's knowledge. So it's to bring you into sort of the higher magician, like to bring you into high magic, or to bring you into like the state of the magician, which is the transmuter, the alchemist, like you're saying. But I don't think everything is solvable with magic, but I do think that there is a pragmatic sorcery.
See, this is actually a huge disagreement I have with you on this. I believe every problem, and I mean that, underline it multiple times.
No, I don't think this is a disagreement, because I actually
with magic.
I believe that all reality can be amended. Now, to call it with magic, maybe that's where you and I have the biggest disagreement. I don't think that folk sorcery or low sorcery can amend reality. Very much.
I believe at a high level it can, because I actually think that people miss out on the capacity like this. I do believe that folk sorcery has a ceiling. I just think it's a lot higher than people say. But when I say magic, I mean spiritual technology of any kind. I don't separate it as much as I think you do. It's all magic to me. You know,
it's all
like,
magic, but there's different yanas, there's different vehicles to get to where you want to go, and also the ability to, if you want to call it higher Sephirotic access, or to the higher worlds or the higher realms. I think that those do not come from folk sorcery. And I think it's very much apparent in looking at, I don't know how many people you know, Alex, from the third world, but you know, as I joked in DM, like I am half Jungle Asian.
Sure.
And so you can look at some of those countries and some of those places, and India is a great example. And you can look at what has borne out as the fruits of that village tantra, which is not really tantra, but we'll call it that.
Sure.
It's very degraded.
No,
and
agreed.
The consciousness is very degraded.
I think
so
that
it has to produce karmic results for me to accept it.
So that's fair enough. I mean, again, admittedly, my folk sorceress knowledge has been from American Conjure, which is vaster than the Hyatt Hoodoo that people think about. Nothing wrong with the Hyatt Hoodoo, by the way, although I have issues with the academic reality of one study being published and then everyone thinks that that's all it is, right? Like everyone thinks that Delta Conjure is like the only way this is done, where it's massive across the entire nation. Each region has its own thing. But there are cultivation practices in Appalachian Conjure, for example. They would not know it as such. They would refer to it as, say, a grace practice, where, you know, they sit and they push themselves into the light of God. And, you know, it's described in admittedly a very less than educated way, but these definitely exist.
Yeah, but that's just, you can just say that's Pentecostalism, like meeting with like the Martinist tradition of Solomonic magic. That's very common in Appalachia, mixed with like a little Native American, a little Afro-syncretic shit.
Sure, yeah, it's all there. But I mean, when I say folk magic, that's what I mean. That's what it is to me, and that's what
right. They're having, but I would say that like that meeting of the Holy Spirit is actually a higher Sephirotic experience. I wouldn't say that, oh, it's lesser. I mean, yes, it's not where I want to go as a tantric, but it's I can recognize and appreciate it for what it is.
Sure, it's not exactly where I want to go either, even having been there a couple of times through those practices. But what I mean in general is, I believe that, and I've seen this borne out in my students as well as myself, when you take that energy, right, and you take, for example, the energy of the grace current or non-dual light or whatever it is, like again, a non-dual light referred to in a Western sort of Bardonic sense, and you put it into a candle spell, that candle spell is going to hit harder. It's going to hit vaster. It's almost like something else is working alongside and through you that knows more than you, that can get things done better than you. The limitation, however, is it will not, at least in my experience, it won't hurt someone unless that's for a really good reason. It's kind of like when you call in an angel, you know, and you're like, do this thing, and it's like, nah. And then sometimes you're like, do this really bad thing, and it goes, okay, cool. And you're like, why'd you do that? And it's like, you'll never understand the good that came of this, you know, that sort of thing. You know, wheels within wheels, right?
Yeah, for the record, I actually do not like working with angels for this very reason.
All right, I can agree with you there, although I've done it plenty, but they definitely will, you know, it's almost like you open a door into your life, and if they choose to come through it, they're going to come through it. But the point is, if you add this energy into your folk magic, your candle spell or whatever, the ceiling raises in its capacity, in its vastness, right? And it's the same with when you add Tawashudi into folk magic stuff, which is a thing I teach people to do. It raises the ceiling on what it's capable of doing. And I think it raises that ceiling to meet that of other things I've practiced. It is not the most powerful thing I've practiced, I will say. You know, a lot of we very sorceress types, we don't talk about our big secret spooky thing that we have, you know, our most powerful practice. But it's definitely up there. It can be expanded. But see, what's interesting I don't know if you found this to be true or if you found it actually to be quite the exact opposite, but the more kinds of magic I learn, the more it all connects into just, which is why in my mind I simplify it to magic. And a lot of my friends who do more complicated systems, like tantric systems, for example, will have all, like my friend Vision on and off, for like, I love the guy to death, and every time I talk to him, I'm like, hey, what do you call this in the thing in the kind of tantra you practice? And he has like a litany of words and names and diagrams and things, and it's all beautiful and extremely elegant. He's like, what do you call it? And I'm like, I'm just doing magic. You know what I mean? Or like, we'll do magic together occasionally. And he'll be like, oh, you did this. Like, this is what you just did. I'm like, I'm sure it is, man. And, it's the lexicons mutating together are fascinating to me, because it goes to show, different ways to map the same territory. But for me, it all bleeds together as one shining power. And it is with that power that I create my life, that I forge ahead in my life.
Sure, the sparks of splendor.
Yeah.
I totally understand. Like, very Hood Rising. I totally get you, Alex. I agree. I mean, that's the first spark of magic, right? Is the fireworks. So it's the first alchemist principle is combustion.
Right.
So right. So I totally agree. I mean, it's like, where do you follow the spark? Like, where does it take you? Well, where do you want to go? Where do you will it?
Oh, no,
Like,
truly,
how do you
man.
get there? So I mean, we're on the same page. Like, I'm a sorcery nerd. Like, to even discuss magic in on a podcast, like long form, like as I do on this show, but also on the Grey Lodge, it's like a dream. It's like a dream to like meet other magicians, meet other people who are like my equals, and like doing living a sorceress life, if you want to call it. That's a little cheesy maybe, but
that is 100% what I call it, man. Like, and for me, it's a dream that I get to do this shit for a living. Like, I have no other income but this. It's funny. I had a very, very humble life before I decided to turn my abilities into making money. And it's only given me amazing opportunities to go places, train with people, see things I've never thought I would. Go to, like, if I have a passing interest in something, I'll find someone in another country to teach me, or at least be willing to sit down and talk, and I can go, man. Like, it's wild, the road openings that I have done that have all come true. But that's the thing. I mean, the biggest thing that I try to stress, regardless of with whom I'm talking, or whether we disagree or we agree on everything or nothing or something in between, is the efficacy of this in creating a life. Because frankly, I don't know if you've seen this in your own life around where you live, but the whole quiet desperation thing is really reaching a fever peak with a lot of people. And I really don't think that, and I'm a tinfoil hat guy. That's a whole nother podcast worth of what I think is going on. But I really think that magic is the solution. And as it goes down, I think that unfortunately it may be the best and eventually only solution for a lot of these problems. I really don't have a lot of faith in normal people who have mundane lives on average fixing this, but I know in my heart, because I've seen it too many times, that if people train this properly and exploit it, then they can have the life that they want.
Well, I do believe in karma, so I don't think people are just entitled to the life that they quote unquote want. But I agree that there is, to a degree, reality is very pliable if you know how, and it's very malleable and amendable to a degree. And I don't believe that like astrology defines us, so I think you and I are probably in agreement on that.
Yeah, no, astrology indicates, it never dictates. Just like
Right,
divination.
indicates. That's a perfect way to actually steal that from you. Indicates, not dictates. No, but I'll credit you. I'm really good about that, Alex. But
I mean, do or don't, man. I mean, it's just like,
no, I do, because I'm sorry. I talk about this, like the importance of standpoint epistemology, and just being like, if someone teaches you something, I believe it's important to credit them, or to like acknowledge that they gave you the word. So I agree that there is something going on. I've called it the Aeon of the Daughter. I believe we're in an aeonic Kalpa shift. If you read the Sri Vijaya Tantras, if you read the Kala Chakra, if you read Chakra Samvara, the astrological components, it talks all about this. Even the layer of the Kalki, people believe that the Kalki is coming. If you're like into the Puranas, I'm not really into the Vaishnava stuff because it's contradictory to the, it's not really contradictory. It's considered to be the outer. So it's not really that important to me. So the Kalki stuff, if that's real, then there's a deeper tantric understanding of a kind of like Tripura Sundari and the goddess, and as she arises in the cube or in the world, as you could say. And so as Kurkula. And so you could say that that is the Aeon, because that is the match to the Kalki. Like there's always, for every avatar of Vishnu, there's a form of Shakti. So, but this one is special because she's obviously tantric, strictly a tantric goddess, not normative Hindu and not normative Buddhist. She's strictly tantric, and she exists in both. So it's just really important because it's like it's an Aeon of flux, like very Aeon flux, and
Yeah, I
it's
was gonna
also
say,
and I often say, yeah, and it's Quicksilver Surfers. That's like a thing I'm well known for saying on Twitter. Quicksilver Surfers, because that is what it comes down to. It's going to be about the people that are able to adapt to carnal ground conditions. So we are leaving Kali Yuga, or we have left, as I posit, or as the Tantras posit, I should say. We have left Kali Yuga, so we are in a kind of the ruins, if you want to call it that, the ruins of the new world, and it's up to us to sort of recapture, re-narrativize, and perhaps even rebuild the seeds of the primordial story or the primordial method.
I hard agree with you on that one. I mean, I have my own lexicon of speaking of it, my own lexicon of omens to point to it, but no, that's extremely real, and which is one of the reasons why I do what I do. One of the reasons why I'm taking great pains to make sure that my educational materials that I produce to train the operant magic, the operant inner cultivation stuff survives me. Like obviously I'm by no means an old man, but I have actually known a couple of, one really good alchemist, one really good hermeticist in like a Martinist tradition, and one really good witch, we'll just say in a Slavic tradition, who died recently, old people. And when an elder dies, a library burns, right? Like if they didn't put it down. And I happen to have learned from these people, thankfully, but it keeps me up at night. The things I didn't, that they forgot that they knew. You know what I mean? Like once you learn so much, like, oh yeah, there's this thing, and there's this thing, and there's this thing, and it's gone. You know, it's a Blade Runner Tears in the Rain scenario. And I think that the processing of this information, the keeping it going, because if we live in one kind of golden age, it's the fact that shit like even this podcast exists. Shit like you can learn operantly in 2 years what took me 24, if you really want it that bad. Maybe 3. But like it can be done, and I think that people have this amazing wealth of ability to really get where they want to go. But I think that if they don't take that opportunity, I mean, there's also one of the reasons why eschatological practices are important. You know, if you don't have an after death practice, you're kind of going to be fucked. But
well, I'm not. Let me just say that I'm not millenarian, so I don't believe that there's like an incoming eschatological like destruction.
Oh no, that's not what I mean. I just mean
okay.
Like you're either going to be
talking about like funerary, like at death practices, like
no that, but I'm also like for example, just using a very very low level one. If you lucid dream, you're going to be able to make more choices after you die, because you won't be in the death dream that a lot of ghosts are, right? Unless, you know, that's one of the reasons why necromancy works, right? We wake them up from the death from that thing. We wake the shade. It can do things. But if you have that practice, if you do build, for example, the hermetic body of light, which I know some people are polarized on whether you should build that sort of thing or not. But if you do practices like that after you die, you have more options.
Oh, I agree. That is a big part of Tantra.
Get recycled into something.
Absolutely.
And now that, but that's important that you can, you know, no, because for me, it's like I want to put down the information that I have so that if I choose to come back, and I have my own personal reasons for believing that I may not have to, from not just things that I have experienced, but things I've been told by people who have no reason to tell me what they told me unless it was true. But if I did choose to come back, I'd want to come back to a world where I can learn all my shit again. You know what I mean? Like I feel like because that's the thing. I'm a very big proponent of reincarnation, just because it seems the most mathematically logical, but also it's the only thing that explains my life.
Well, do you believe in karma, Alex? Let me ask you that, because reincarnation predicates belief in karma. Like you have to. It doesn't make sense if you discard one or the other.
The answer is yes and no. Okay. So I believe in a sort of, and again, I'm sure you have 1,000 tantric Buddhist words for what I'm about to describe, and I would love to hear them. But I believe in a sort of spiritual physics of cause and effect. I believe it can be, if one understands the mechanics, hacked to a degree. I believe that the magic you do, like for example, I believe that a person who does magic, any kind of magic, has a different weight to that than someone who doesn't, because there are choices we can make that they simply can't, even at their highest level. And I think that if you are, for example, evil, like truly you do evil sorcery and like nothing else, and I mean the most evil kind of sorcery, you know, the Saturday morning cartoon villain shit. And I've met people who do this, by the way. This is a real thing. This isn't some Bardonic autism dream about the Black Lodge, which might have actually just been like someone he knew that made a puppet of somebody once. Again, Bardon, man, I love you and I hate you. One day we will meet and you will probably have a tantrum at me. Point is, I think that there is a spiritual weight to what we do with our magic. I don't believe it is simple. I believe it's complicated. And I think that I think there's a line after which if you do too much, you are weighed down, for lack of a better word, and you can't soar quite as high, and you might have to do another turnaround. You know, you may have to come back and be born again and be another kind of magician who does something better. But I do believe that in the case of someone like me who was born into a legacy occult family on both sides in the wealthiest, safest country in the world, and an extremely safe and freedom-oriented, agency-oriented part of that country, who got to basically do nothing but train this his whole life. I tell people this. I did go to college for a bunch of useless shit because I used magic to get free college. Which, if you're in America, you should be doing magic to get free college. That's just self-defense. But I never had to do it. I didn't have to work a job I didn't want to work. I just had to do this. This is all I have ever had to do. I think that this was planned. I think that I set this up. I had to have on some level. And I think that those of us who cultivate high enough are able to put things in motion to set this thing up. Perhaps that could be that you've accumulated enough of a certain kind of karma. I know there's 1,000 words for different kinds of karmas, that you can then spend it, for lack of a better word. I hope you understand what I mean by that. In order to have like a better next life, so you can do more and move more towards all sorts of stuff. But that is what I believe based on the experiences that I have had, not merely what I have read.
So I think you said something really interesting, Alex. I mean, everything you said was quite interesting, but I think the agential part, that we are agents of our own free will. I think you might be even maybe surprised to hear me say that, but Tantra is very much about your own agency.
Okay, so that I'm not surprised about, because any tantric person I've ever met who could do anything that was worth a shit to me was a very free will person.
Yeah, exactly. So Tantra is about your free will. Like you choose, like I said at the more in the beginning, you choose to practice Buddhism or you don't. You choose to practice Tantra or you don't. You choose to, like for me, if I get up in the morning, I choose to do sadhana or I don't. It's totally up to my free will. But I agree with you actually that magic karmically implicates us. That's why I do distinguish between worldly sorcery, which I'm not against. Even though I pushed back on you a little bit, and I appreciate that you took it. I'm not against worldly sorcery. What I'm against is using the practices for worldly means, because the higher practices actually will produce results. It just takes a little longer, but the results are actually more profound. They're more karmically clearing. And this is also why that people I'm not saying you, Alex, but I'm going to say as a kind of like a royal you could say,
Sure.
people who are sorcerers, they should learn a Vajrasattva practice, not Kurukula, not Vajrakilaya. They should learn Vajrasattva. Why? Because the peaceful form of Vajrakilaya is Vajrasattva. So if you really can I'm not saying you again, Alex, I'm saying for people.
Sure.
If the people can really shift reality, then you should be able to shift reality with Vajrasattva. You don't need Vajrakilaya until you get up there. So Vajrasattva is actually very specifically, for clearing transgression, karmic debris, past sins, to make yourself stainless, pristine, prepare. It's a preparatory thing, but it's also like if you read any of the higher sadhanas, any of them, Chakra Samvara, Vajra Yogini, Kala Chakra, Guya Garbha, Guya Samaja, Hivajra, all of the tantras, they all have Vajrasattva practices built in the highest of the sadhanas. Because even if you're practicing those higher sadhanas, you still need to karmically rectify. What if I make a mistake when I pronounce this word in Sanskrit? I pray in Tibetan usually, but I do say the mantras in obviously Sanskrit. So that requires rectification. So I'm a big believer in these practices of rectification. That's not to say that Kurukula or Vajrakilaya can't rectify. Of course they can. They both have that power, actually, very specifically. But the way it takes form in the material world, for us, at least in our perceptions, will be different. Vajrasattva is strictly to clear karma, which also can be illness. So to go back to your example of illness, like why would you do something? Well, perhaps there's an idea that you would intercede as much as you are capable of doing it, but perhaps it's also that person's time. Perhaps it's also that person's karma, but also perhaps maybe your intercession was whatever. I don't believe in fate, but we'll say like it was part of the karmic, like the way it works, the cause and effect. Okay. But perhaps you also karmically implicated yourself. So that is something, I'm not saying you did. I'm saying from my perspective, that is how we would more, or I'll just speak for myself. That is more how I would see that. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't do the same. I wouldn't go to a Goetic spirit because I know that there are higher practices. I could even do White Tara. I could do Medicine Buddha. I could do Nam Gyao Ma. There's so many healing practices. There's actually secret healing Dakini practices. So there's a lot of illness defeating deities, including some forms of Guru Padmasambhava and also Vajrakilaya. There's a very famous, I'm not going to say his name, but there's a very, very famous Kila deity who is famous for clearing illnesses. So what I'm saying is that I feel like I am capable enough with the higher practices to not have to engage in worldly sorcery. Now, that doesn't mean that the higher practices aren't karmically implicative. Au contraire, they're actually much more karmically implicative. That's why my tendency to be cautious is just for myself. I'm not putting any fetters on anyone or saying what you should or shouldn't do. I try not to ever do that. But I also have to be careful in the ways that I express things and the way that I frame things, simply because, yeah, there are people who listen to this that will say, oh, Jin. And again, I jokingly call myself a dukun all the time. I know you don't know this, Alex, but my family's in Indonesian Chinese. So a dukun is it has multiple translations. It can be like an Obeah man. It can be a shaman. It can be a psychic. It can be like an urban kind of like practitioner of what's called Kabatinan, which is like a syncretic, tantric, Sufi, Hindu, multiple things in it. Taoist has all these elements in it. So it can refer to all these different things. It can also refer to tribal practices from the people from the jungles, like the Orang. So I am a sorcerer, but I also am a Buddhist.
There's a lot of Western magicians, unfortunately, become burdened by a sort of religiosity, right? Like the number, for example, of Solomonic magicians who are Mormons. Huge secret.
Yeah, because they're Martinists. Mormons are Martinists.
No,
I've said this for a long time. they're so into the heavenly hosts. Like, I find it very repellent personally, but I'm not anti-Mormon. I'm just not a Mormon, so it's not it doesn't magnetize me in any way.
No, sure. So it's just interesting because, like I said, there are plenty of Western magicians who have their own sort of socio-religious spirituality about it. So if you talk in terms of anything, for example, like anything that bridges into Eastern stuff, into Eastern philosophy, that isn't like the frankly neutered aspects of theosophy. Not that I'm a respecter of theosophy in general. To be blunt, I'm not. I think that the majority of theosophists were unmagical cowards. And I feel the same, frankly, about most of the Golden Dawn. Because
I actually met someone, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Jamie Paul Lamb. He's his new book is on Astro Goetia. He was actually the most impressive Kabbalah practitioner I've probably ever spoken to, barring Greg Kaminsky. I'm not saying this to like big him up or anything. I'm saying that, and he's in the Golden Dawn, and I was honestly shocked, Alex. Like, I was shocked. Like I said to him, I was like, I didn't know, because I've met other people in the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
And he was by far the most polymath, the most learned. He could do multiple systems at the same time. It was very impressive.
No, so it's interesting. I mean, I've met people who were lodge magicians of various kinds, and 90% of them almost didn't even believe in magic. And there were the rare ones, who were good, and they all had the same story. I am not good because of the Golden Dawn. I'm good almost in spite of it. It's like when you see a movie that's good, it's not good because of Hollywood. It's good in spite of it. They're like, yeah, I mean, I learned all sorts of other stuff that basically makes the system work better or at all, or I do the system better or at all. Now, there are some lodges, I will say, that seem to produce better people in terms of magical ability. But my point in general is, like, I think conversations like this bother a lot of people because they're not used to, one, having their ideas challenged. And that's a big thing in occultism. It's a lot of people who are waiting for the other person to finish speaking so they can speak rather than listening. And you learn as much, at least I do, from the things I don't agree with as the things I do. If you don't pressure test your beliefs, your philosophy, your theory, and this is true even outside of pure esoterics.
Absolutely.
Like your views on life. If you don't pressure test these things, you don't know if they hold up. So if you do talk to someone, and the interesting thing about magic is that, like, you talk to someone who's got an entirely different worldview than you. For example, I'm very good friends with a Central African shaman whose idea on cosmology, spirits, everything is different than mine. I don't agree with, unironically, a single thing he believes. And yet the man has appeared to me in terms of ability. So I have to ask myself, well, then why is that the case? Like, why are we both able to do more or less the same things on high levels if we disagree completely? And this is an important conversation to have because it takes a lifetime to answer that question. Like, there are times when I still don't know. And, I have my beliefs, but that's why I always delineate between that which I have experienced and that which I believe, that which I theorize, right? Because for me, the core is like what I saw, what I did, what I made happen. And everything expands out from that because, like I said, you can talk to another occultist on a podcast, you can listen to something, and, he goes, I summoned the spirit and I got this money. Did you? I don't know. I wasn't there. Now, you should probably assume that the person isn't lying because then, because then that might mean we all are, and clearly that's not true. But for me, like I said, it's the pressure testing of these beliefs, of these experiences. Because even the conversation we just had on karma, right? I think that, because when you talk about, like, the higher practices are more karmically heavy, to use, an imperfect phrase, I actually agree with you on that. I believe that certain higher things, like I'll give a concrete example. Supposing you do conjure to make someone love sick, like to experience the physical feeling of having like a high school crush on you. Very powerful way to affect somebody, right? When you affect the somatic nervous system with magic, it does most of the work for you. That's one thing. But let's say let's go to Franz Bardon, his third book, Key to the True Kabbalah. The letter magic in that book is extremely powerful because it works with some of the foundational forces of creation. Big claim, yeah, I know, but I have seen that to be true, and so have other people who practice this. I would also argue that letter magic is a fairly universal thing. Like Bardon's system, you find in Tatwashudi, you find in a Phoenician system. There's a guy, Bob Smith, he has this thing called 60 Skills. He's big on that too, and his method is also very good. But like there's this one energetic force that pair bonds someone to you. Like if you were to use it, because these forces are amoral. You can use them. You can use this thing, for example, for animal husbandry to make like livestock breed and breed healthy children. But you can also use it on someone and make them like love you. I've never done that, but I know someone who actually did, and it was a nightmare story because this woman like freakishly adored him in like that true love kind of way, and he was just kind of trying to get laid. Like he misused the ability. But because it affected this person so deeply on like a cellular fucking level, like her aura was like, it was different. It was like there was a different person in there. It was fascinating in a morbid way. I believe that practice carried a significant more weight than something that would simply affect someone's somatic nervous system for a lunar cycle.
Sometimes those things are kind of like a reliving of the karmic connections of the past, like red string theory. I don't know how familiar you are with that, Alex, but it is part. It's like more you could say.
Theory, do you mean the Japanese thing or the physics?
Well, it's a Chinese. It's a Chinese. It was actually a Mahayanist way to describe karma that got kind of popularized and put into the popular culture in Japan.
I just thought of anime, so
yeah, no, that's what it is. It's from anime. No, like anime is a hermeneutic. Absolutely, I've done so many shows.
Listen, big weeb from way back. So
well then you fit perfectly because I have another co-host, Matt Murrah. He taught me this term, pop Kabbalah, and he's like, Jin, you're just doing pop Kabbalah, and I was like, what? That's a thing? And he's like, yeah, of course it's a thing because it's all in. It's all in anime, just like Sailor Moon. I often talk about this. My friend Sochki, who's a physicist and a mathematician, he taught me. He didn't teach me. I was already good at Kabbalah. He would talk about how Sailor Moon was Kabbalah, and it took me a year, but now it started to click for me. Like I knew it right away because you can see the colors, you can see like the abilities, the planets. Yeah, exactly. You can map it right to the tree, like 1-to-1. Okay, I get it. But it's becomes more fundamental when you start to realize like, yeah, there's actually a Gnostic story in this anime that she's clearly telling. And it's not just limited to Sailor Moon, although Sailor Moon's a particularly good example.
It fucking is. And I'll give you a quick anecdote and you're going to love this. So I had a student, one of my first private students, teaching her magic. And I said, because I always ask my students, I'm like, what do you want in life? And I tell them, everything you want is real. Someone's going to have it. It might as well be you. I said, what do you want? And she goes, one of the things my heart desires the most is I want a group of friends. Like she never had a group of like solid female friends, right? And I was like, okay. And she's like, but and we talked, and she ends up being a huge Sailor Moon fan. So what she did was she summoned various planetary genii to bring her a female friend that encompassed each planetary virtue. And she's like, her chart in Western astrology is extremely moon heavy, so she was the moon. And and it worked. Like I have a picture of her and her friends all cosplaying the Sailor Senshi on my desk to remind me of not only how real magic is and how much it works, but how that perfect loop in connecting a system can produce an extraordinary result. Because the way she met these people was nothing short of miraculous, like nothing short of physics bending, timeline changing, groovy shit, right? And I think that part of that is she probably piggybacked on the thing you're just talking about, the reality of that connected to that story.
Sorry, Alex, I muted myself. But I'm sure you're happy to hear that.
No.
I'm just totally just kidding. But no, you're totally right. There's a primordial story. There's like a backbone to reality. Like Kabbalah, in my opinion, is like the backbone. But I'm calling it Kabbalah. But it could be tantra. Like that's how more I understand it. I'm just being honest. I just will use Kabbalah as a kind of like as I said, like a language, a common tongue.
Yeah, it's a language
for a Western magician, right?
Yeah. Because pretty much everybody has like stared at the Tree of Life glyph enough to be conversant in it, you know.
That's exactly right. You hit it right there. Everybody's somewhat conversant in it, so it's okay to use as like a language of that you have in common, even though your system might be different.
Yeah, I mean, I do hardly anything with Kabbalistic magic, although one could argue. So this is another thing. If you take Bardon's letter magic and you pattern it to the Sefer Yetzirah, each of the Hebrew letters can also summon one of these primordial forces. But actually, I interrupted you. So go back to your thing. You were talking about your life had expanded, and the thing I said made me think.
I've just had an expansion of my sphere. I've never gotten attention for like my intellect, or like what I say or what I think. So it's kind of, podcasting has kind of transformed that for me, where people take notice of the things I say, think, believe, perceive, discuss.
It's even interesting that you say that. So another thing I tell a lot of my students is they're like, okay, well, you know, I want my love life to be better. And I'm like, all right, you know what the most effective Venus talismans in the world are? There are 2 of them. So what's that? I'm like 6 months in the gym and standing on a slightly raised platform with a microphone. Like literally having a platform of any kind and not being fat are the 2 most powerful Venus talismans a man can ever have. Because it's true. I mean, as a figure in the occult community, I too have been approached by things. It's funny. So one of my hobbies is I'm a guitarist, right? And I've been in, you know, shitty local bands and whatnot. And I've gotten more attention for being a niche occult weirdo than I did for playing guitar in bands.
My niche interests are like magic, tantra, film, and art, and all that stuff. It's not really traditional masculine endeavors, but as a person, I'm pretty traditional. So
I mean, a lot of people would argue that an interest in art is a traditional masculine endeavor.
Well, it depends. I think it depends on the kind of art you like. I tend to like more experimental, avant-garde, kind of like mixed media, like challenging art.
Well, at least you didn't say fairy porn. I mean, it could be worse,
right?
Well, so there's that. But the way I always looked at it, and this is a personal theory. I don't have like an esoteric tradition to back this up. But from what I've observed, different people resonate differently with different energy currents, like different systems. Which is why one person, and I've educated enough occultists in my life and watched other occultists, both related to me and not be educated from the ground up, that I can kind of comment on this with some degree of accuracy. Some people just not, it's more than just vibing. Some people seem to be etherically structured to handle certain magic better. Like some people are very permeable. You know, they do a bit of malefica and then it rebounds horribly no matter what kind of cleansing they do, no matter what kind of attempt they do to scrub themselves off. And some people, they can like roll into the muck and come out shining clean again and again and again and again and again, regardless. And I'm not saying that like doing Goetia is a necessarily evil or bad practice. I don't believe that it is. I believe that it's what you do with it. And also I believe that it depends on which spirits you summon and work with. They're very different. And there's 72 of them, and they're quite different. And that's just even using that grimoire. There's also, you know, the Moses grimoires, the Faustian ones, etc., the Verum, that kind of thing. But you know, I think that some people just vibe with different ones in a very etheric body structure kind of level.
Of course, that's Dharmakaya. That's what that is. It's the mind stream. There, we say there's 108,000 different kinds of vehicles for 108 billion different kinds of people. Absolutely. People are going to vibe with different kinds of different systems, different traditions, 100%, because they'll have a karmic reason to maybe continue or finish or pick up where they left off, or they, you know, this is the other thing though about being pick and mix, as I call it, is that you can actually lose yourself too much in certain things because you think you have a connection, you perceive yourself, but that just might be a past life connection and you just let it go. That can also be true. I'm just saying that there's a multivariance of possibility. And so I tend to not trust, not that I'm saying anything that we say or anything that other people say is bullshit. I don't think that. I agree that there are, like, magical experiences are very real, very real. And higher Sephirotic experiences, higher tantric experiences, all of that's very real. But it's just like you would probably say it's more external, where I would say it takes place on the carnal ground of ultimate reality, which is, of course, your own mind.
I would say it's. You're right. I, mean, I would say it's percentage of each. I'm a 60-40 guy. I'm a 60% external, 40% internal. But even then, I think it's a little bit more delineated than that. If I'm going to be honest, I think there's a spectrum. I think there's the vital level, etheric level, astral level, mental level, akashic level, non-dual level, and I think that everything stretches up beyond those. But I still think that the vital and astral levels contain the majority of these things percentage-wise. If you were to ask me the numbers, it would depend on the day, depend on my recent experiences. But that's the system that I use. That's what has worked best for me and what has given me the best tangible experiential results on all these levels. But so it's interesting when you were talking about the practices that you wouldn't give people because there's a
I can't teach anyone, so it's not about. I'm not correcting you, Alex. I'm just saying for my own clarification, I do not teach anyone practices of any kind. Sure. Well, just to be very clear, right. But I'm not saying that you're saying that. I don't want people to accuse me of that.
And that's important, especially in your situation. But as someone who does teach, I will say I have definitely given thought to the gravity of which practice. Like, there's a degree to which, like, it's like if you own a martial arts studio, you're eventually, and I have a friend who does, you're eventually going to have someone who comes in, they're going to learn what you have to teach, and they're going to go hurt somebody with it. Like, they just will, and you may not be able to tell. And especially if you're keeping the lights on, you're paying the bills, or more, you're thriving, you're living very well. You have to think about that. But I do think there's a certain set of practices that I know there's a certain set of practices that I have that I won't teach anyone, actually, because if you have a lot of teachers, especially because I tell people this all the time, I've had teachers who were like living saints, and I've had teachers who were evil, like truly ontologically evil. Because a younger me, I wanted to be the baddest motherfucker I could. So I sought out the most dangerous occultists I could find to learn from. And the things you learn from those people are things you keep locked in a box in your heart forever. Because, you're like, oh shit. Not only, because again, like I always tell people, this is more real, more effective than you think it is. Because the thing I hate the most, and I will harp on this until I die, and probably long after, is the occultists out there who go, oh, a magic can't actually X. Because of course it fucking can. You can't. And that's your failing. But it can. Someone can. And I've seen too much crazy shit in my life to not believe that. But when you realize that expansive reality can go in some very horrific, not just dark, but genuinely horror movie, awful type of places, not only will you not teach those specific formulas or whatever you learn from someone, but you won't teach the stuff that could do it. And it's funny because every now and again I run across an author who does teach those things. They're hard to find, and they're usually like self-published or like a weird free PDF that you'll come across and you'll think it's bullshit, and you're reading, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's where did you learn this? So they're definitely out there. But you gotta wonder. Actually, this is a question that I just have, because as I'm rambling and opining, what do you think when you run across something like that? When you run across someone who either has some knowledge that maybe they shouldn't, or you run across a source that is giving out something very diabolical and very destructive? Like what goes through your mind?
Well, okay, so there's two parts to this that I can answer, like two ways I'm going to answer it. Okay. So one was when I first started podcasting, this was 3.5 years ago, I did a series on the Mahavijaya, so the grouping of 10 goddesses, but I did it in more of a Newari Buddhist way. So I did it more syncretic, but obviously I'm a Buddhist, so I brought Dharma, like Buddhist Dharma, to it, so more non-dual. So that was a correction to this other tree that I had seen that used Kali Kola. So it placed Kali at Kether. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. Even for Kali Kola, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of like the numbering and how it works. She's not first cause, and she never is assigned first cause. She's a prime mover because she's the destruction of time. So I'm not trying to get off tangent, but the reality is I started podcasting to correct what I thought was and is a grievous error in some unlearned left-hand path person's I like the left-hand path. I'm not against it in any way, especially contemporary left-hand path material. I'm interested in it. But I thought it was a grievous error. So I felt like I needed to correct it. As I've evolved and changed and sort of been more embodied more of those aeonic qualities that we talked about, I realized I cannot control what other people do or think, but I can say what I think is the closest to the primordial truth, as close to that being relative as I can. So as long as I have some kind of integrity, some kind of rational way to explain it, using Kabbalah or using tantra or using colors or using conceptual ideas or using anime or using video games, which I've done all of that, I think that you can make a case for a material wisdom science so people can sort of take the seeds and develop them on their own. That's sort of what the project is, I guess, is like to give people like elements of what I think, and then also like draw from text and say, yeah, this is real, this is real, this is real. But I also really strongly emphasize the processes of consciousness, and also like you're talking about the internal body work, because that's a really important thing in Tantra, not just Dzogchen, but a really, really important thing. But it's a huge part of Dzogchen as well. I don't practice Dzogchen, but it's an important part of like all higher Tantras, is this kind of like the channel system, the chakras. We use a different number. We have different channels even than what normal people understand, like not normal people, I mean saying regular like hatha yoga people understand, and we just have a different configuration, just like with all systems, right? Like there's multiple different ways. That's totally fine. That's very tantric as well. It's like change cosmologies dependent on the text. So I just know that I can't control it, but what I can say is my version, and maybe I think my seeds are better, correct, more closer to the truth. So I hope those seeds can eventually plant a garden in people's minds, and then they go out and build, different things. But I mean, I don't think that the magician crash outs are uncommon. I think it's actually 90% the story of magic is like magician crash outs. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree, but I personally think that most sorcerers end up in a bad way, either in this life or the next. And so I think that there's a reason why a lot of older magicians, older than us, since we're almost the same age, go to Buddhism or go to these kinds of more practices of rectification. I think that there's no accident. I think there's no accident that Greg Kay is a Tantric Buddhist. I think there's no accident that Zena LeBay is a Tantric Buddhist. I think the's no accident that Nicholaj is a Tantric Buddhist. So I was an edgelord. I hear you, Alex. Like I was that. I was like all full left-hand path. I was ready to like, whatever, like let's destroy the world. Let's invoke like the Barbello to like, shake things up. And like, yeah, I love breaking klipas. I love like, Tantra, and I love talking about like Ekajati and Chamunda and that whole story. But I also fundamentally understand the Shaktis as existing in consciousness, as stages of consciousness. So now my understanding is based on both experiential wisdom, but also recognizing that non-dual state, that they are non-dual, that we are non-dual, and that our perception has to exist in non-duality to really understand what they are. And for us as Buddhists, dakinis are fundamentally empty, which is luminousness and masslessness. It's not nothingness. So I guess as I've grown, my perspective has definitely changed and more in line with the Buddhist view. But I also think that it's not just Buddhism that offers like the higher knowledge. I recognize that it exists in other things. So I guess, right, so what I'm really trying to say is that I can't control what other people think or do or perceive, but I can control what I think, what I do, and how I perceive. So if I start fundamentally with my own mind, maybe my words will be clearer, better articulated.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, I too realize that I can't, on a mass scale, control what people think. It just, for me, I guess there's always that thought of like how they get their hands on this thing, But I agree with you that there needs to be, and of course, multiple systems have it. I would argue that some of the systems that I practice have it. That like purifying, cultivating, evolutionary aspect to it. that a person does need. I think that so it's interesting when people talk about the sorceress crash outs, or most occultists have a bad end. I would say it's probably, in my opinion, and influenced by necromancy and speaking to the dead experience, that it's like 50-50, at least from what I have seen. Then it's delineated completely down those who had no cultivation practice of any kind and those who did. Like, even if you look at Bardon people, whether they're purely spiritual or whether they're diabolical people like me who occasionally use it to pay the bills, there is that, like, I'm going to project to this planetary sphere and this planetary sphere and this planetary sphere, and get more cool experiences and wisdom and whatever from these spirits, and perhaps ask them to help me with stuff along the way in my life. And then you get to move past it. And interestingly enough, that gravity that I talked about, that I perceive in terms of karma, there are practices that I've learned from various traditions to ease it, to burn it off, to cleanse it, that kind of thing. And now, while some people admittedly have presented it to me as a sort of hack, like, oh, you can be as bad as you want, just do this thing. Some people have presented it to me in there's a limit to what you can get away with, what this can actually burn off. And they all disagree as to what that limit is. I don't know that any of us truly know, really. But the magician ghosts that I've seen that have become like vampiric or monstrous or awful or just like disquiet spirits were the ones who didn't have a cultivating evolutionary practice of any kind. The ones who did ended up being better. Now, that said, I guess for context, I do know of people who have like an evil cultivation practice. I met a Taoist yin alchemist once who was like, I'm going to become a demon. That is my goal.
I get that, Alex, but that is the plot of one of the most famous Chinese wuxia stories of the last decade. It's called Grandmaster of Demonic.
China? No.
No. But Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. So he's supposed to sit down in this battlefield that is now a carnal ground, and he cultivates the hatred current, or the ghosts, which is depicted as black and red. But he's not trying to be a demon. He's trying to figure out like his past life where he got murdered. So maybe it takes on a little different connotation for sure. But there's no real, like, yin cultivation is real, and like people definitely have experimented with that throughout the history of like Taoism and Chinese, both folk religion and maybe cultivation practices more broadly. But really, Taoism is well, some people don't like that I say this, but they even understand it to a large degree, especially in the medieval time, to be a novel kind of dharma. So they understood it to be part of like this more axial system. Now, whether it has permutations into folk magic or black magic or demonic sorcery or whatever, sure, Tantra has that too. But it's all about bringing things into view. Like, where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? And like, do you want any karma left by the time you get there? Because it's like, you were saying you believe in reincarnation. Well, I don't believe in reincarnation personally. I believe in rebirth. But it's similar, so we'll just call it reincarnation for the sake of our conversation. So when you're reincarnated in the God world as a deva, same for an asura, you actually burn karma just simply from existing, just from having a higher material reality. So is it really that? Is that like where you want to go? Like, some people, that is where they want to go. They want to be at the pinnacle of like either human worldly life, which is, you could say, arguably part of the Deva realm. That's how both Tantra and Buddhism would describe it. Or do you want to, or even the Deva realm itself, or do you want to go higher than that? Well, we would say that you want to go higher. You'd want to, if you want to just give it a strictly tantric layer, you could say it's Bhukti, Mukti, and Siddhi. Like, do you want the dialectical relationship with the deity at every turn in your life? Now, is it spiritual experiences like you were talking about? No, it's very subtle. That's how it's always described in Tantra. I'm just saying strictly for Tantra. I'm talking about deity accomplishment. I'm not talking about like powers or anything. I'm talking about specifically about Mukti. But then there's also bhukti, which is bliss. So that can be understood in various ways. Of course, there's like different layers of meaning for that. And then there's also siddhi. So siddhi is like the spiritual powers. Obviously, this is a more tantric way. It's not just like the Hanuman's 8 great cities. No, it's a little different. But basically, you have multiple choices. It's not just escape samsara, escape the black cube. There are different ways to engage with it. So I have started to come around to this idea of like the not fixed model, where you can kind of say, yes, there are multiple conclusions, but like, do you have a place where you want to get to? And where is that? And how do you want to get there? Because all of that matters. That's all part of karma. That's all part of rebirth.
I mean, that's actually really analogous to a lot of the witchcraft traditions I've studied. There's a lot of like in the twilight of a real witch's life, he or she will build a castle or a palace of some kind. It's basically a mandala. They do a lot of like it's basically your mind palace that you can expand around you and then do stuff.
Yeah,
with.
they borrowed that from tantra 100%.
I don't know.
Tantra Buddhism, 100, yes.
No,
they
sure.
absolutely did. That's a Vajrayogini practice that is building the mind palace that comes directly from theosophy. 100%. Like no
sure. I agree that that's where it came from. I don't know that they know that. Because it was just what they were taught. A lot of these are like oral tradition type people who are like, I don't know, it just works. But they build that so that they have a place after they'll snap to that right after they die. Because they usually build that and they build the body of light and they store the body of light in that, which is stored in them, while they can expand and contract it. And I've done these practices myself. And, that's like when you die, like if you're murdered even, you'll snap right to that and then you get to make your choice. You get to from that position of safety, relative safety in the spiritual world, according to their cosmology, you get to then go to this realm or that realm or whatever you need to do, whatever you've made arrangements to do in your own way. And like I said, in the twilight of their lives, they'll usually spend a lot of time making these arrangements in various ways. Now, whether that's in their case, making a relationship with a certain spirit that will shepherd them there if they can't go on their own, because some of them lack the power. Some of them don't. Some of them really don't lack the power. But they'll be able to do that, and then they can be various things. I know one woman, for example, who, because she's the matriarch of a family tradition, she'll not only have this, but her skeleton will be made into this weird shrine thing, and then she'll be given offerings, and she'll become like a local god, and that's what she wants to do. That sounds a little bit constricting to me, because even when I asked her, I'm like, well, will you be able to leave the forest? She was like, well, why would I ever want to leave the forest? Now, of course, you're talking to a woman who literally never has in her years of life. I mean, you're talking about someone who was born behind the Iron Curtain. You know what I mean? Like the individual scope of a life is what it is. But yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a thing. I mean, I agree with you that you need to choose where you want to go and have the options available to you, and then know what you're doing. But it's what fascinates me too.
I just want to say this one thing about becoming a local god. Like we have this in Malaysia and Indonesia. It's called Datuk Gong. So you can become a road god or a local deity, like a genus loci. You can be installed as that, but you have to perform great miracles and be recognized by the community first. So you could say that there's a karmic thing. Like not just anyone can become like a land spirit. You might become a yakshini and like have your own tree and, be in the forest. That could be true. But unless it's like you've ripened the karma for that, this is the thing about rebirth, Alex, is like you might have 10,000 lifetimes before you're able to sort of articulate yourself in that way.
I mean, I believe that to probably be true. I think that, so there's a similar heroic deed set required. And again, the person I'm talking about is literally the matriarch of an entire clan of witches, and their family has been like the local boogeyman of a certain region for a long time. So I think they've stacked deeds aplenty. But it is a similar thing. And it's, another thing that fascinates me is just how similar it all is. Like I tell the story a fair bit. I had a kickboxing instructor years ago. years and years ago, who said there's only 4 martial arts in the whole world. There's hitting shit, stabbing shit, throwing shit, and grappling shit. Everything else is expanse on that. And I find the same to be true largely of magic. The roots are the same. The techniques are the same. Rotate the fucking apple in your head, you know? And then everything else from there expands. And things certainly expand in different directions to a degree, specialize differently. But the more I learn, the more it all just seems like everyone can do the same things, provided they have access to the best version of the thing, if that makes sense.
You know, every vehicle is imperfect because we're imperfect. Our minds are imperfect. I'm not saying this about you. I'm saying about me. And so I do believe that there is probably, I just think that the Aeon is about remaking the seeds. I think that it's not so much about these fixed traditions. Like you were saying, like when an elder dies, a library burns. I personally don't believe that. I personally think that the seeds can be remade as long as you have, well, we would say in Tantra, like the bijas. So as long as you have the bija, you can remake entire practices. You can make entire traditions. You can make entire worlds even. So, you know, it's much more relative is what I'm trying to say. For me, I'm just very flexible like that. It's not that I believe in something so specifically, but I kind of take it more as a process of consciousness, which may or may not be fully the truth. But of course, it is partially. So the reality is like I start with my mind. And I think that everybody should do the same. And cultivating practice is not just for gaining powers and all of that. Like, yeah, that's great. I mean, every tantric wants that. Like anyone who's telling you that they don't want that, that's bullshit. But there's another reality too, that it is about your own mind. And once you fundamentally understand that Rigpa non-dual experience layer, it is very hard to then look at the kind of like lesser or gross cities the same. That's just my experience. That's my experience with other people talk about it. It's a very different kind of formulation than you start making in the world. That doesn't mean you don't forget. You're only as good as your last non-dual gnosis, right?
Yeah, no, that's a quotable. That's a quotable way to say that too. I like that. But I guess to a degree I can see that. I don't know. I would say that maybe I've just had different revelations on things. Like I've done, like for example, the Taught with Shitty practice will put you at that non-dual experience if you do it enough times, and you'll have that moment where, you know, the only way you can describe it is by what it isn't. You know, that extreme expanse of different perspective, agency, knowledge, that kind of thing, that when you come back, everything is different. I guess I just didn't feel, and no matter how many times I've done it, which hasn't been like a shit ton of times, I suppose, but no matter how many times I've done it, I never came back feeling the way that a lot of other people say that they do. Doesn't mean that mine's right or wrong or that yours is. I just think it's different. I think that, you know, I don't think it erases your personality so much as expands it. You know, it's sort of like if you do a shit ton of Tumo to the point where your body heats up and you can actually be outside when it's cold, like that, and then you have extrasensory experiences, it doesn't change who you are, it kind of expands who you are. At least in my experience it has. And I don't know, man, like it's fascinating to see these other perspectives, because honestly, again, a real treat for me, this conversation, because I don't get to have these talks a lot with people.
No, absolutely. And everyone is, you know, a lot of the ideas that we're discussing right now are very intermediate to advanced. They're not, these are very semantic kinds of, we're just having a semantic discussion between magicians, but really we probably agree more than we disagree.
Absolutely.
And I think people could hear that as well. All ideas should be tested in discursive fire. This is a very tantric thing. Discourse and debate, very important. So we as magicians, if we're going to call ourselves, I'm going to call myself that. I'll call you that too, Alex. I don't know how you self-identify.
I mean, but honestly, man, when it comes to the whole thing, I'm a magician. I'm a witch in an old world sense. And I'm a sorcerer. I'm a conjure doctor. I'm an Obeah man. You know, I'm an internal practice enthusiast. I'm a bardonist. You know, I'm all sorts of stuff. It's all good to me, man.
Okay, well, we'll say sorcerers. I like that word. I like sorcerer. because it means you utilize spiritual technologies rather than specific systems. So I think that this is a really important thing that are doing, is that we're having like a dialogue between sorcerers, testing our ideas. We don't necessarily agree, but we're kind of challenging each other to hear each other and then also to defend our position. I think this is very important, personally.
Agreed. I mean, like, truly, I'm certainly going to walk away from this conversation better than I walked in terms of all sorts of stuff. I mean, I find on two levels, this is helpful. One, it as we said, pressure tests your ideas. But I actually find that every time I'm fortunate enough to have a conversation with someone at these levels, my sorcery gets better, my magic gets better, because I'll be engaged with spirits, I'll be out of my body doing things, I'll be exploring other realms, and then I'll have these ideas echoing through me, and it might be able to lead me to something new. You know, literally in terms of like, you know, a new astral doorway that shows me something cool. You know, there are times when I've been, again, the rare opportunities I have with this, I always encounter new spirits. They come to me in dreams. They show up in wild places when I have the opportunity to go out into the forest where, you know, there's no electric light, you can see all the stars. Things will show up that have nothing to do with the local area, but they have everything to do with what I just heard. You know what I mean? It's a very fortunate experience, but these conversations, for me, they trigger these opportunities for spiritual growth.
Absolutely. That's 100% what this is about. That's what my whole project is about. It's about this and just like discussing magic, just having these exact experiences, meeting, also like networking, and not networking in like the business sense, but networking in the sense of, going deeper into the occult, quote unquote, community. I don't know if that really exists, but we'll say it does.
You know,
And
maybe it does. It depends on the day.
so please, Alex, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to hear and or partake in your services or your courses or anything that you have to offer on socials. Make sure you plug yourself. I'll make sure it's all included in the show notes, as I always do. And again, thank you so much, Alex.
Dude, it makes my day. You're a fucking legend, man. I appreciate it. So if you want to find me, listeners at home, practicaloccult.com. It's my business partner, Allison, and my business. Again, if you want any of the Solomonic Pentacles, she's got you. If you want education, divination, personal coaching, all that kind of stuff, you got me. If you want to go to the Hex Doctor on Instagram, you can see me opining more about magic and stuff, but also posting unhinged memes that make fun of people I don't like in the occult community. So if you want the polite stuff, you go to Practical Occult. If you want Practical Occult After Dark, you go to the Hex Doctor. I'm also going to have a Substack coming out soon, which is going to be even fucking worse. Thank you again so much, dude. You many blessings to you, man, truly.
No, to you as well, Alex, and thank you so much. And of course, I do. I wouldn't have anyone on the show if I didn't think they were cool. So everybody check out Alex and the Hex Doctor on Insta, and also his site. We're always open to the based and a little transgressive, because all magic is kind of transgressive.